Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson, live from the studio, Check the Mic studio. Listen, we appreciate everybody. It's only the people that are here early in the chat that deal with the teething problems. So there's only a few people that get here early, our biggest hardcore fans. But we apologize for any audio issues.
Yeah. Well, it's a new studio, as we've said before. We are still very much in the teething trouble stages, made more acute by the fact that we are now on our own in this room. Previously we had help, in the room who could fix things quickly.
It's all remote now.
Right. Now it's all remote. We are basically on our own. That's trouble, potentially. And as we said, the lights, we have one sign that's now been successfully dimmed to the appropriate brightness. The other sign has yet to be dimmed. It is at 100% brightness because apparently these things were shipped with dimmers in the box. Only one of which we can find.
You may have thrown one out. It's okay. We're getting there. So bear with us. That FanDuel logo will just be dimmed a little bit, hopefully by the
eventually.
Theoretically,
there's a couple of replacement dimmers on their way right now.
But we're coming at you as the, banner says.
Right.
Live from Your Name Here studio. So that's again a call to Jeff Ruby's. If you want to support a nice local business like us.
And why wouldn't you?
With a seafood tower and some steaks. And your name on our studio, we're down. So, Jeff, if you're listening or anyone else.
Do you think we could get
Rolex studio?
Yes, Rolex studio. That would be, Rolex would be a good sign to have here. Look, there's space. There's a sort of little, we could a third gap there with a Rolex sign.
I could be a watch influencer.
You could upgrade, to a fancy Rolex.
You think I could upgrade? This thing stopped working, by the way. We're going to talk. Anyway, today we're previewing the AFC and the NFC East. Anything else at the top here? We're only going to talk about the studio for the next 10 to 12 shows, just to remind people, hey, we're in the studio. We're in this new place.
People thought it would never happen. We've been talking about this thing basically for the entire offseason. Be in here before the draft. It's now July 31st. So, we've only just been in here. So, we're going to talk about it for a bit.
Two more things really quick before we get into all of the great stuff with the AFC and the NFC East. Over 50,000 subscribers.
Phenomenal.
Thank you to everybody.
Not
Shout
just
out
over,
to,
but we're like 500 over now.
Oh, yeah. I think we're cooking. Like the quest for 100,000 is on. And I think we could get there by the draft. I think that's a reasonable goal to get to 100,000 subscribers by the draft. We've been doing this now under a year, and we just appreciate everybody that's joined us and been a part of Check the Mic since it started last August.
We're chasing down that play button. We want it.
And then the other one was football is being played tonight. So you might be watching this, later. But right now we could say a football game is being played tonight as we record here on July 31st. Trey Lance is going to play football. It's the Hall of Fame game. We're all fired up. It's going to be great. So football tonight.
Of a sort.
It's a game. It's the first game since the Super Bowl. Let's enjoy it, unless you're a UFL fan or whatever the league is now. All right, you ready to go?
Yeah. It's potentially a comparable level.
It could be the same thing. We're previewing every single team. The first show that we did was the AFC and the NFC North, so if you missed that, go check it out. We're going to go through the Easts today. The AFC and the NFC South may have already been pre-recorded for this Monday morning. So Monday we'll have the Souths, and then the Wests will be next Thursday. We also have some travel coming up. We're going to hit a few training camps and various things along the way here.
Do other people do, points of the compass previews the way we do?
I don't think so. Got to stand out. Be unique here on CTM.
Okay.
CTM catch on yet?
I have no indication that it has.
I said CTM to Kelly the other day. She goes, "What's that?"
Yeah.
I said, "That's the name of our show."
You're like Austin Gale.
Just
dropping
CTM.
acronyms.
Because you put CTM on your mug there. I told her, Sam put CTM on her mug. He's like, what does that mean? Let's check the mic. All right, here we go. Buffalo Bills. We're starting in the AFC East, previewing the Buffalo Bills, 13-4 last year. Won the AFC East. We had a Josh Allen MVP.
Just before we get into the Buffalo Bills, there are sporadic reports that the audio is cutting in and out for people. So can the chat just sound off about whether that's actually a big problem or not right now? Because if it is, we may need to nix the current stream, start up again, try and sort that issue. But I'm not sure if it's good or not.
All right, everyone's saying that was a good trick to get everybody to comment. We appreciate everybody bearing with us as we sort this out. And as you were saying, like we're being produced. Will and Ben are producing the show remotely.
Correct.
So if something breaks in-house, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll figure it out.
It's a little on the nose, the check the mic has repeated microphone problems so far in the new studio.
At some point, we'll be called, the mic's good. We're ready. All right. You ready?
I'm ready.
Reset. The Buffalo Bills, coming off a 13-4 season, AFC East champions again for 5 straight years now, whatever it's been since Tom Brady left the AFC East. And another disappointing finish in the AFC Championship, just missing that opportunity to get back to the Super Bowl. Josh Allen coming off of his MVP season, and as we've been doing on this show, we've been going through FanDuel. Our friends over here, our future partners here in the next couple weeks. Over-under at FanDuel is 11.5 wins here for the Bills.
Very much hope they continue that. Otherwise, we've got some remodeling to do in the studio.
Yeah, hope they don't back out in the next couple weeks. That would be embarrassing.
Sorry, what was the question? Bills.
Bills, discuss.
They, like the Baltimore Ravens, like a couple of the other teams we've talked about so far, I mean, you expect Buffalo to be one of the contending teams this season and be, basically as good as any team in the NFL. They have already dodged a bullet in terms of training camp injuries. First-round pick Maxwell Hairston went down what looked like a nasty, serious injury and was feared he was down long-term. Turns out it's a more minor knee injury, and they expect to have him back in a few weeks. But, this is always the X factor that's out here for the next few weeks is practices are happening, training camps going live, and every single day is an opportunity for somebody important, unfortunately, to go down and change the math league-wide.
High level, when we talk about the Bills, and have mentioned this a few times this offseason, as we always do, I think it's important for a team that comes so close every year, has these heartbreaking losses in the playoffs. I always want to see how they react to it. If it's something drastic, if there's a massive overhaul to what they're doing. And I don't think we're seeing that. I think the only reaction the Bills may have had, and I don't know that this was conscious or not, was to just stock up on defensive linemen and corners. For that, and now that you mentioned, okay, Hairston has an injury. I mean, they spent almost all their draft capital on defensive linemen and cornerbacks, a lot of slot corners. And those are the things that have really hurt the last couple of years. For fear of getting sidetracked too much, I'll just bring this up quickly. The Red Sox, I was watching their documentary from the 2004, about the 2004 Red Sox. It reminded me so much of the Bills and maybe even the Ravens. The whole documentary is about how the Red Sox spent all those years trying to beat the Yankees and how did they do it and how do they reset the culture to try to do it, and they had all this heartbreak, and they just kind of kept at it and just got better and better, and at some point they got over the hump, and since that point they've been better than the Yankees. I couldn't help but think, like, Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, they should be showing this thing in the locker room to the Bills. There's so many parallels to the Bills and to the Ravens. Like, Harbaugh should be doing this with the Ravens. There's these parallels of how do you get over the hump against this team that continues to just have your number in the biggest moments and always seems to get the break and always seems to make that one last play. And I don't know if there's something tangible the Bills can do, like how do you convert the QB sneak on 4th and 1? How do you make that one last play? How do you make that one stop against Mahomes and the Chiefs? But I think they're still in position, once again, the Bills, to make that run. But there's got to be something that gets them over the hump in the playoffs.
Yeah, there does. Buffalo, I think, has been in a tricky position recently because they're the best example of that I can think of in recent years where, they are confronted with this decision every offseason. Like, do we change something significant to get over that hump, as you said, or have we just been kind of unlucky? And we tend to think, well, if you've been 3 or 4 times in the same situation, you lose all the time. That's not luck. But it could be. I mean, if you flip a coin 4 times, it wouldn't blow your mind if it came up heads 4 times in a row. Like, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that you can just end up coming the wrong side of 4 consecutive close calls. And I think that's basically what they've determined is, no, we don't need to do anything crazy. We're not going to blow it up. We're not going to, do something radical. We're just going to keep knocking on the door. And I think from their point of view, I think that is the right call. I don't think that their failures, quote unquote, in the postseason are indicative of some critical flaw in the roster or the coaching staff or the quarterback. I honestly think they've just been close, and, maybe you can say beaten by better teams, but, the correct thing for them to do is to just keep getting there again and hope that this time, 13 seconds goes their way.
From a personnel standpoint, what you're saying, this team looks well-stocked once again, right? There's not much turnover. The one starter going into the draft that they may have needed to look at was corner, and they did draft Maxwell Hairston in the first round. Luckily, again, he did not tear that ACL and should be back within a few weeks as we record here. But the entire offensive line is back. You've got the MVP and Josh Allen. The offensive line, by the way, Brandon Thorne ranked them second in our offensive line show.
Former MVP, right? Didn't
Josh Allen?
Right, he won it this year.
He's the reigning MVP.
Getting the years mixed up.
Just cut that out.
Lamar Jackson.
I understand. It's been a long offseason.
Yeah.
Reigning MVP. It's like being a president, though. Like, once you're an MVP, you're always an MVP. So we could say MVP Lamar Jackson because he's
every year.
MVP Cam Newton, MVP that kicker at one time in 82, whoever that was. So anyway, I know we've talked a lot about the Bills' ex-receiver and what they're going to do there. I don't know that it matters a ton. Remember last year we said, look, I feel like they've built this receiving core with a whole bunch of inside, tight split, slot type of weapons. Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman probably excels there the most. But they bring in Josh Palmer now to play on the outside. I think they have enough weapons given the way Allen is able to play. And my favorite part about the way the Bills have evolved these last couple of years is I think the run game is getting better and better. And there's more games that the Bills play every year now where it's less on Josh Allen. I know he just won the MVP, but there's more games where he doesn't have to do as much over these last couple seasons, and that's better for the overall team and their ability to win in different ways.
Yeah, and I think part of that is the offensive line getting better and better year on year. And, we covered this a little bit with Brandon Thorne on our offensive line ranking show that you can find out there. If you haven't watched or listened to that already, go check it out. But remember at the start of this whole Josh Allen thing, the Bills seemed to take the real creep back toward average approach in the offensive line. Didn't invest huge, but threw a lot of bodies at it. And for a while it was an average offensive line or a line that was, going to be in and around that area. And then Aaron Cromer comes over, one of those offensive line coaches that has an incredible reputation. And Brandon Thorne made this point. That line has gotten better and better every year since he's been there. So I think you're seeing some of the benefits of that, the dividends that's paying. Josh Allen having his best seasons, but also that run game getting more and more potent as that line gets better.
So that's when we do our previews and reviews throughout the season. I mentioned that a lot, right? Can the Bills win without relying on Josh Allen? Break glass in case of emergency on 3rd and 4, and some key downs. But the more that they can rely on James Cook, those playmakers, and the offensive line, as you say, I think the better for the long term of the Bills. The one last thing I'll say, too, remember, they keep beating the Chiefs in the regular season and losing in the playoffs.
Right.
I don't know if there's something in football that you can do. Like, we've got this perception that the Chiefs don't try as hard and then they turn it on in the playoffs. I don't know if there's a way to explore that for the Bills in those big games. If there's a way to save your best for the playoffs, I think we should consider that if you're Sean McDermott in Buffalo. It's a tricky one that they keep running up against. And then defensively, I mean, when we were talking about the Bills around draft time, right after the draft, I'm like, they're 12 deep on this defensive line. I know some of their offseason additions are suspended,
right?
But they'll be back. Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi, but Joey Bosa, another guy, bubble wrap him until January. But they've loaded up on depth on that defensive line, and I would say that was the one team building move that I think Brandon Beane did, which was say, we don't want to go with a depleted defensive line, with a depleted secondary into the playoffs like we have in past years.
Yeah, and that's an area where they kind of need luck to just bounce their way a bit, right? Like, they've had defensive linemen injured going into the most critical games. They also, remember last year, the effect that losing corners had on them, right? They had to change game plan because Kyer Elam has to come in, can't run the defense that they want to run. Suddenly the whole game plan goes out the window. Like, things like that have, detrimentally harmed the Bills in the playoffs in the last couple of seasons. And again, look, this happens to a bunch of teams. It's all about how you overcome that kind of thing. But it also just shows how dependent sometimes you are on a little bit of luck bouncing your way. Like, Buffalo, they've sort of karmically earned a season where Joey Bosa doesn't get hurt. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of history they've got in the last couple of years, that they're owed one. They're owed, like, Joey Bosa actually hitting his best form week 18 and rolling into the postseason looking like the old Joey Bosa.
The defensive line, I have a soft spot for defensive lines that are built with depth and different body types. This might be the best out of all those. Gregory Rousseau, who's as long as nobody wins with length in the NFL as well as Rousseau. You have the undersized pass rusher, TJ Sanders, rookie out of South Carolina. You have Deion Walker at 340, 50, 60 pounds, dancing bear type, and it is 6'6". I love the different body types that they're throwing at the offensive line.
This is again,
Landon Jackson and his length off the edge from Arkansas.
For the people tracking Steve's ideal roster composition, your defensive line wants to look like UFC 1, where it's like a 6'1", 210-pound kickboxer going up against a sumo wrestler.
That's what I want.
Yeah, that's what you want your defensive line to look like. Every single possible body type thrown in there.
And that's what they have. Ed Oliver's on the undersized. They just have a whole bunch of different types.
Right.
AJ Epinesa. So I'm rattling off all these defensive linemen, and I do think even if some of those guys get hurt, and it's not that they're all great, it's just the depth and their ability to rotate and then hopefully stay fresh by the end of the year. I think that's a big part of their strategy this year.
I mean, clearly that's their sort of plan, right? Like what do you do in the offseason to try and get over this hump? What they've tried to do is to insulate themselves from those injuries that have derailed postseason runs, like losing, a cornerback for a game in the playoffs. They loaded up on that defensive line so that theoretically no one or two injuries should derail them. They tried to do it at corner. It's a little bit tougher, but they bring in a collection of corners. Hairston, they also drafted Dorian Strong lower down in the draft as well. So they've tried to, insure themselves against that kind of, not catastrophe, but that kind of body blow late in the year.
Let's wrap it up with this. The Bills had incredible turnover rate last year, and defensively they've forced a lot of turnovers the last couple of years. It's general analysis is like that's difficult to maintain, but you were sending me something this offseason. Like they've done a pretty good job, at least on the defensive side, forcing the turnovers. I think Allen in the offense, they were great at taking care of the ball last year. That is usually something that reverts back to the mean, but the Bills have been on the positive side of this the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's not to say that that's never possible. I mean, Lovie Smith had an incredible track record, particularly with Chicago, where that Bears defense always overperformed a sort of standard, can you force turnovers type of deal. So
usually if you play more zone, that old school cover two type of scheme, you're going to have your eyes on the ball. You're going to be able to turn it over more.
And you had a guy like Charles Tillman, who was, a guy literally a sort of specialist of forcing the ball out. So you can force turnovers at a greater rate than other people if you make it a genuine focus and you play certain types of defenses. It is generally a fairly noisy statistic, and I think it's always at least vulnerable to going back in the other direction in a way that's outside of your control. So even if you do the same thing every year, you're like, well, one year you're just not going to get those turnovers. But yeah, I think it is fair to say that this Bills defense has become extremely good at forcing turnovers.
All right, man, let's wrap it up here with a pick. Over under 11.5 wins here for the Bills, and we'll have our official predictions for the season in a couple weeks. When we go to Circa, we'll do a special show kicking off our division winners and Super Bowl winners and everything. But I'll ask you here, though, is this the year that the Bills get over the hump, and do they go over or under the 11.5?
And this is tied for the highest mark in the league, right?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's above 11.5. Bills, Ravens, I believe, are up there.
And if you look at them the last few years, they've sort of bounced either side of this. They've been 11 or 13 in each of the last, 5 years straight. I will go with this being a 13-win year as opposed to an 11-win year.
There you go. So that's over. I'll take the over again as well. And a big part of this depends on how strong you think the AFC East is. We'll talk about those other three teams right now. But with the Dolphins taking a step back on paper, maybe the Patriots look a little bit better. The Jets are in transition. I think, the Bills might be. Remember, they locked up the division before they even played the Patriots once last year. One of my favorite stats of all time. That's how dominant they were in the way the schedule worked out. So I'm expecting them to, win it by December again, most likely, the AFC East. All right, let's go Miami Dolphins next up here. 8-9 last year. Their over-under is 8.5, so right in that similar spot from our friends over at FanDuel. Interesting offseason for Miami. Remember a couple of years ago, trading for Tyreek Hill.
Yep.
They've traded for Jalen Ramsey. They signed Teron Armstead. Over these last few years, they went for it hard with the veteran type of players. Now Teron Armstead is retired. Jalen Ramsey's been traded to the Steelers for Minkah Fitzpatrick. So a bit of a transition type year for Miami. That doesn't mean they can't win and compete, but some of the veterans that they were relying on the last couple of years, now they're coming back and resetting the roster a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I got to admit, since they hired Mike McDaniel, whose brief was basically rescue Tua, right? Like, things hadn't gone well. Offense was a mess. Tua was a mess. And they hire Mike McDaniel, and, he's on the plane telling Tua, you're my guy, it's going to be great, all that kind of stuff, right? Since that moment, and honestly, at that point, a lot of people were already writing off Tua. But McDaniel was like, no, he's my guy. Since that moment and since that sort of initial, how do we get Tua working, how do we create that, since that point, I don't think I've understood what Miami is trying to do as a big picture strategy. What direction are we heading in? What is my North Star? I don't think I've understood what their approach to this is. And this offseason has been maybe the most confusing offseason to that as well. I don't understand what they're trying to create here other than, Tua's the quarterback and he's important. Let's keep Tyreek Hill in the building, even though every time things go south, he makes ridiculous statements in the media and we have to blow the whole thing up and patch it back together. They're confusing to me. Like, it's too good a team to be awful because you've got Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Like, there's still too many talented players there. But there are massive holes on this roster and, like, huge areas of what look like catastrophic weakness.
I'm not going to say I'm going to tell you that why you don't understand this. I don't think it's hard to see why they are where they are, though. As soon as Mike McDaniel comes in, they made a move to go for it. They were aggressive to go get Tyreek Hill, to get Jalen Ramsey. They were aggressive. And I'm not saying they went stars and scrubs. We oversimplify that whole idea, but they went star heavy, and they lost out on draft picks. They haven't drafted enough. That's the bottom line there. It's not okay. They have not drafted enough players, just like the Saints have not drafted enough players the last couple of years. Usually when you look at a team and you say, well, there's a weakness on the offensive line and they don't have enough defensive line depth and their cornerback room, the cornerback room in particular for the Dolphins looks like the worst in the NFL.
Yes. By
far. When you lose all that depth, you usually go back and say, did you draft, at least 7 times every year? And they haven't. Also, lost a first rounder a few years ago. This is when that stuff comes back to bite. So I think they're just in a reset mode. I think the tricky part of the analysis for the Dolphins is even in their go-for-it moments, 2022 and 23, in 23 in particular, I should say, they looked really good, right? They were beating up on bad teams, and they were like the Cowboys that year. They couldn't beat the good teams, despite being faster than everybody, despite having star players everywhere. They couldn't beat the Chiefs, the Bills, and the best teams, the Ravens, the best teams in the AFC. So they still had a ceiling, and now they look worse. Now they're not as strong even on the offensive line. They're not as strong probably on the defensive line. They've had a lot of injuries on the edge the last couple of years. I would say the edge group has a chance to be really good. So how did they get here? They went for it a couple of years ago. They didn't draft enough, and now they have to replenish with youth, and they're just probably a year or two away from really having that young nucleus to build around.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some young players that could make huge differences. I mean, Kenneth Grant, I love Kenneth Grant. I think if they tap into the full breadth of what he can do, he could be an absolute difference maker for this team. If they just look at him and say, you're 340 pounds, you're going to be a nose tackle and stop the run, I think that's a disappointment. Number one, it's disappointing because I think he can do more than that. Number two, I think it's a waste of what he can do. And number three, it means he's not worth where they drafted him. Like if that is actually how they plan to deploy him, but if they let him do what I think he can do, that could be a really important pick for that defensive line. It's just so weird. Like even the sort of moves that they've made to add in name recognition are weird, right? Like you bring in a Darren Waller out of the studio, out of retirement to be your tight end. It's like, okay, I guess. Jack Jones is by far the best cornerback they have on the roster now, and that's like a sort of desperation move. because the every other corner they have is a disaster. You trade away, obviously, the one good corner you had to get Minkah Fitzpatrick in the building. I actually think that was good business because the relationship had broken down so much. But it's still, let's take one good corner and replace him with one good safety who we also drafted and didn't know how to use way back in the day. It's just such a weird team.
Offensively, for the Dolphins, we've been talking about their offensive line for a few years now. Tua saves them a lot because of the quick release and the receivers as well. Like the fact that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are so fast, get open quickly, right? The pass game saves the offensive line, but they have struggled not necessarily to run the ball, but to run the ball between the tackles, to run the ball when they need to and in key situations or a short yardage. And I don't know that that's better. I don't know that the offensive line is necessarily better. It might actually be worse with Teron Armstead retiring. So there's questions up front. A lot of pressure on Patrick Paul, second year, second rounder. Struggled with a 44 PFF grade as a rookie. But you and I both kind of liked him. Like, we liked him in the second round, right?
Yeah.
He was a reasonable second rounder as a developmental type of tackle. That's where you take those guys. But he's got to step in and be good up front. Austin Jackson's been better in the run game than he is in pass protection. So there's still this idea on third and long, it's difficult to just sit in the pocket, pass protect with this offensive line. They're not the best up front as far as the run game goes, but there's still the speed. Right? You still have to deal with Hill, Waddle, Devin Achane at running back. So it's still going to be a difficult offense to defend. But I have the same questions I had a couple of years ago. Can they go up against the best defensive fronts and actually have success?
No, agreed. I mean, I think the offense should still be pretty good. I think the passing game should be good. The passing game and Tua's quick release absolutely saves that offensive line. I think that's maybe as bad as any offensive line in the NFL, but it gets made look significantly better because Tua gets the ball out a tenth of a second faster than anybody else in the NFL on average, and will, on average, be the fastest time to release of any quarterback as well. Now, that changes quite a lot if Patrick Paul is good in year two, but that's a total unknown at this point. But I think the offense could and should maybe be still pretty solid. But, if you are, and this is the other element, like teams have begun to figure out a little bit Mike McDaniel's offense. They know where the pressure points are. They're able to put it under pressure more. If that's the case and this becomes harder and they're able to make Tua hold the ball a beat, suddenly everything becomes harder.
Last year, the defense, I think it was top 10, I believe, in EPA per play. It wasn't. It was all right. I mean, it wasn't awful. I still think they have some questions up front. You lose a Calais Campbell, who's always really good at football. Presumably replace him with Kenneth Grant, who you mentioned. But not having Bradley Chubb last year, Jalen Phillips has battled his injuries the last couple of years. They have a chance to actually have a really good pass rush if Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, and then
Chop Robinson.
And then second year of Chop Robinson. Now you've got some, if they're all healthy, you have some depth on the edge. I have questions about the defensive tackles, but you have a first rounder there, a reasonable group of linebackers. To me, the question's all in the secondary here. I think it's the general toughness up front. They have not been the most physical defensive line the last couple of years. And then just the cornerback room, like I said, which could be the worst in the NFL right now. So there's a Rasul Douglas still sitting out there. There's still a few free agents that will sign after camp. You've got cut days. That's the place I think Miami absolutely has to look. And if they can you still might find a starter or two on the waiver wire or in a Rasul Douglas, and all of a sudden this defense looks much better.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like Stephon Gilmore is out there as well. There are players out there that would absolutely upgrade this cornerback room. Maybe not every cornerback room, but definitely Miami's. Yeah, look, there are pieces there where this could be good. Jalen Phillips is a good player. Chop Robinson looks like a very good pass rusher right now. I love Kenneth Grant. Zach Sealer is one of the most underrated defensive linemen in the NFL. Where Bradley Chubb is going to get back to, who knows? But like that, there are the pieces that group could be very good. But there are some massive critical flaws on this roster that look, even with additions like, can we bring in a Gilmore? Can we bring in a Rasul Douglas, that look too critical to overcome? If this team wants to, challenge for a division, make the playoffs, do anything other than just sort of win 7, 8, 9 games and be nondescript.
Going back to how they got here, 2022, the Dolphins only drafted 4 times. Remember, in 2021, they had 2 first-rounders, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips. They got Javon Holland in the second. That was a really nice haul there. But 4 draft picks in 2022, 4 draft picks in 2023. Those are the picks who are supposed to be coming into their prime now. They're supposed to be sitting here in years 3 and 4 saying, okay, here are the guys that you're building around. And Devin Achan's the only one who's really a starter out of just those 2 draft classes. That's how we got here if you're the Dolphins. So I think they have to be shrewd as far as, again, those free agent type of pickups at corner. And, they need the offensive line to come together and some of those young players to, hit the ground running more than other. They're relying on some of the young players more than some other teams.
Yeah. I mean, particularly a guy like Kenneth Grant, like they need him to be good pretty quickly.
And then all that said, there's this theoretical ceiling that they hit a couple years ago, right? So even when things were going, Tyreek Hill was uncoverable a few years ago. Last year, he was banged up. A lot of the reports are that he'll be fine, like whatever injuries he dealt with last year.
He's out there running like 10-1 100-meter times.
And he's a fascinating player just because he's always been faster and quicker than everybody on the field. At the NFL level, as we've talked about, that's unreal. But he comes up limping like once a game, and you're like, oh, is this it? Is this it? And then he comes back. Like it looks like he blew a hamstring, and then he's back 2 plays later. And I've always thought he was fragile, right? As soon as he loses a step or 2, is he as good? Like, he's not as good.
Right.
But I think he's fast enough right now. I think he's got a massive bounce-back season. So I think Miami's dangerous in the sense that they could put points on the board with Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Achan, all the speed. But is there a ceiling to Tua's game, and is there just a ceiling to this team overall?
Yeah, I mean, the offense generally, I wonder if it has that. When they had that run for like the first half of the season where it was the best offense in the NFL, it was like historically good, it was as good as anything. I don't know that that's there as a theoretical ceiling anymore. I think the league has a better handle on what this offense is, and I don't know if all of the component pieces that were required for them to hit that ceiling still have that in them. Tyreek Hill, he's an interesting case because, I mean, at his peak, he was the best wide receiver in the NFL, right? It was like, is it Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill? He was 1-1A depending on who else you wanted to put in there. And now it's like we're talking, is it Justin Jefferson, is it Jamar Chase? And Hill's out of the conversation. But if he's still running 10-1 100-meter times, I mean, that's insane. Like, that's fast. That's like you are right on the cusp of actually competing for 100-meter, that's like legitimate 100-meter athletic athletes are running 10-1 100-meter times. So it's the complete opposite of has he lost a step at this point in his career. It's like that's as fast as he's ever been. So if that's the case, can he still do what he was doing a couple of years ago where he was uncoverable and, putting insane numbers out there and looking like the best wide receiver in football?
So that's one of the wild cards here for Miami. That and just like health on the defensive side, which they have not had. Remember 2 years ago they rolled in the playoffs. They had no edge rushers, and they went from a deep edge rush group to having the draft class of 2012 off the street trying to sack Patrick Mahomes.
Put some respect on Melvin Ingram's name.
Melvin Ingram was great 8 years ago. So if they stay healthy defensively, if they have Phillips, Chubb, and Chop Robinson, that's a legit pass rush. Zach Sealer on the interior, Kenneth Grant. Like, there's potential there. But if all those things hit, I think I still have concerns about them beating the best teams and doing it against the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the best teams in the AFC. Mm-hmm. Over-under's 8.5. Where are you going here for the Dolphins?
Under. I have enough concerns and questions about some of the moves there. By the way, what a fascinating quarterback room that is. Tua, Zach Wilson, and Quinn Ewers.
Oh, and Ewers tearing it up at camp. Got some Ewers fans out there. Michael Irvin said he's the next Tom Brady. Is that right? Is that the analysis?
Did he?
Something like that. Somebody came out and made it, this happens every year. Like Luke Falk was the next Tom Brady for some people. You just throw it out there, and then if it doesn't happen, people forget it. If it does happen, Michael Irvin, genius. Zach Wilson Reclamation Project, always interested in Zach Wilson. I'll also go under here for the Dolphins, but I see the other way. If everything breaks the right way as far as health, pass rush, like their pass game and pass rush has both high-end potential. I think there's weaknesses in
Yes.
enough other places that I'm concerned.
Agreed.
All right, let's go New England Patriots here. They are coming off another 4-win season, back-to-back 4-win seasons. Gerard Mayo, one and done as head coach. Mike Vrabel comes in, takes over. The over-under's up to 7.5. Not only does Vrabel come in, but you had as much movement and offseason activity as any other team between a deep draft class and a lot of free agent money spent for the Patriots. So
Massive turnover.
For the first time in a couple of years, there's some level of optimism with the Patriots. Year 2 of Drake May, Vrabel coming in. What are your thoughts? Stephon Diggs, the big name that they brought in that no one else wanted, but they brought him in, and in camp so far, sounds like he looks pretty good, and I think he could be a difference maker. What are your thoughts on the Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, we've said it for a while now. I think the Patriots have one of the broadest range of outcomes of any team in the NFL this year. It could all be a disaster easily. I mean, it could be, right? We sort of saw this a year ago. It's a little bit like Chicago, right? Where everyone was so optimistic this time a year ago about everything Chicago had done. They've upgraded the receiving core. They got Caleb Williams. Everything's great. And then it didn't all work out. And now we're praising them again for the great offseason, right? It's kind of like the Patriots. I mean, process-wise, we really liked what they did a year ago. They got Drake May. They decided not to move off that pick and assemble draft capital and try and do it that way. They took their quarterback. He looked great. And then they sort of shotgunned offensive line and receiver with the rest of their draft picks, which I think from a process standpoint is the correct way of doing it if you're going to take the quarterback. And none of those guys worked out. None of them. They were all, I mean, the receivers in particular were awful. Jalen Polk, nothing. So as much as we like what they've done this offseason, it doesn't mean it's going to work. I mean, Stephon Diggs, sure, he could be your number one guy. He could also be an old, broken down receiver coming off an ACL injury, right? And not add anything to the group. Kyle Williams, we love his route running, and he could be your number one guy really quickly. He could also be a guy that was drafted where he was drafted. So there's definitely a world where none of this works out. Drake May doesn't take a step forward, remains sort of mercurial, inconsistent, capable of doing amazing things, but also prone to a couple of bad decisions a game. But I think the flip side is also true, where this could be the year that the moves they made do hit. And if all that happens, like if Will Campbell's stumpy little arms don't matter, and actually he's just a good left tackle who's already shown he's a good left tackle in the SEC against top competition, Diggs still has some juice. Kyle Williams is an elite route runner. All of a sudden you look at this group and you say, with the great Morgan Moses comes in, solidifies like a rock right tackle. You could easily talk yourself into this team being not just like passable, but good.
Yeah, when we did win projections this offseason, we said massively wide range of outcomes here because of everything that you've laid out there. Drake May, as a rookie, I think easily the worst situation of any quarterback. Between the offensive line, there was a point last year where they had 3 starters on the offensive line who had like a combined 100 snaps in the NFL. And that's what he was playing behind.
That's not ideal.
The best thing Gerard Mayo did and that staff did, as I've said, is Gerard Mayo taking 30% of the Drake May taking 30% of the snaps while Jacoby Brissett was the starter. I think that's the one lasting legacy that maybe the entire league should adopt, is the idea of actually developing the quarterback and not just saying, well, you're the backup, sorry, saying everything we need to do has to point to making this guy ready to play. And I would say, given the circumstances, the questions at receiver, the awful offensive line, May did pretty well. Was excellent running with his legs, and particularly it was as a scrambler. They weren't designing this for him. Got concussed twice. He's got to not take as many hits, but I think May showed that his athleticism plays at this level. He made a lot of big-time throws, had some boneheaded plays in there, had some just pure accuracy issues, which showed up at UNC. But I think the kind of like Cam Ward. I think for me, it's the big play potential that May brings to the table. Even if he's going to miss a few layups and turn it over a couple times here and there, I just think the big play potential is something they haven't had since Brady, and that's part of what the volatility comes from with this offense. But I think May has a chance to make some special throws. And make some big plays for this offense.
He does. I mean, where he's going to settle in terms of performance level is such an unknown, because I was so impressed by how he looked last year in that terrible situation. But it was remarkably consistent that he kept having one or two disastrous decisions per game. And this is where, this is why quarterback evaluation and projection and all that kind of stuff and draft scouting, it's so hard because on the one hand, you've got these two things battling against each other. On the one hand, we know that one of the most consistent, predictable, sticky traits, data points year on year is those boneheaded decisions, right? Guys that are prone to those do not tend to eradicate them from their game. It tends to be a thing that sticks year to year. But we also know that a terrible situation increases the volume of those things, right? Being under pressure constantly means you're going to make more bad decisions and create more terrible plays. So how do those things work out this year? Theoretically, that's a trait that's inherent in Drake May. But also theoretically, everything around him made him more likely to make those bad plays last season. And those things should be better this year. So does that mean he's going to cut way down on the number of bad plays? Or is that just Drake May and we have to try and get that back on the other side?
You have Josh McDaniels coming back in as offensive coordinator, another disastrous stint as head coach with the Raiders.
What a legacy.
Oh, man, I saw Jimmy Garoppolo and Devontae Adams talking about it like man, some dark times, man, dark times.
People hate that guy as a head coach.
They hate head coach Josh McDaniels.
Hate him.
But offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels has done pretty well. Now, most of it was with Brady, little Cam Newton, little Mac Jones, but overall it's been pretty good. I think the May's ability to throw to the middle of the field, I think will work well in McDaniel's system. Demario Douglas already looking really good in camp. And honestly, every time he's been out there in the NFL,
he's a good player.
He's looked like the best receiver. So I think, look, I'm not calling this the best receiving core in the NFL or top 5 or anything, but
good.
If Diggs is 80 or 90% of what he's been in the past, that's still a number 1 wide receiver in this group. Kayshon Boutte's having a good camp. Demario Douglas, I think, is an excellent slot receiver. Rookie Kyle Williams, Mac Hollins on the outside. It's a little bit how they've built it the last couple of years. There's no true alpha unless Diggs is what he was 3 years ago, but still, that's not a bad group. It's reasonable, and it's certainly better than what they've trotted out there the last couple of years, plus Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper at tight end. So you have options there, and then you've got the offensive line. Probably 2 rookies starting. Will Campbell at left tackle.
Next to each other.
Yeah. Looks like Jared Wilson from Georgia, 3rd rounder. He was in the 3rd round, right? I keep, again, mixing up my mock drafts with reality. But Wilson played center at Georgia. He looks like he's going to be slotted in at left guard. I loved him as a prospect. But you've got 2 rookies on the left side.
Yeah.
Morgan Moses at right tackle. Can they creep back toward average? Again, I think that's possible.
Yeah.
But I also could see this idea that, hey, you're still a year away in this entire offensive line rebuild.
That's what I'm saying. You can very easily imagine both pictures panning out. I mean, there's definitely a 5 wide receiver man room there, or even a 6, where you're like, this is not a bad receiving core. Certainly it's perfectly serviceable. And like you said, maybe it's missing the true superstar, but it's more than enough for Drake May to look good. But you can also imagine a world where it repeats a year ago, and it's we're going, how does, Kayshon Boutte, we already know he's not good enough for this kind of, you can imagine a world where it doesn't work. Same with the offensive line. We really like Jared Wilson. Will Campbell is a good, maybe he's not a great player, but he was a good player. Mike Uwenu, I think, can be a very good player. Morgan Moses is solid. You can picture the group being fine. You can also picture Garrett Bradbury has been, an underwhelming disappointment for Minnesota for years. He's now the center here. 2 rookies, unlikely to play high-level play. Maybe Will Campbell's arms will be a problem at the NFL level. And even in college, people described his tape as good, not great. Maybe that's going to be an issue. So it's very easy to imagine 2 radically different performance levels, certainly for the offense. The defense, I think, is more tightly grouped in terms of where they're likely to land. They've got a lot of additions in the offseason. There's some very interesting players that were already there in terms of Keon White, Christian Gonzalez at corner. I think the defense should be pretty good.
Yeah, the defensive line depth, and I want to talk about the cornerback group as well, but the defensive line depth, Christian Barmore coming back, with full season of Barmore, coming off of his health scare basically last year. Yes. So you've got Barmore. They spent a ton for Milton Williams, $26 million a year, huge number. for a defensive tackle. And even if Milton Williams isn't a superstar, I think him and Barmore as a 1-2 punch. They bring in Harold Landry. I think, fine against the run. He's not an elite one-on-one pass rusher, but, knows Vrabel, knows the scheme. And Keon White is probably the biggest wild card here because of his strength, power, and you get into this different body types and style. And Caleb Von Chason had a really nice year. I don't know, he'll never look like a former first-rounder. He's a former first-rounder who probably will never look like a first-rounder, but is a nice 3 on the edge, having a nice camp so far. So I think there's a world where this defensive line, a lot of their additions in the 6 or 7 deep that they're rolling actually ends up being pretty good.
That's what I was going to say. Apparently he looked like it the other day in training camp.
No, I know. I mean, that's fine. I mean, that's sometimes guys later in their career, and Jason was good last year with the Raiders. I mean, good at various points, made some big plays. So, and then you have the 1-2 punch of Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez at corner. Now, Gonzalez got hurt. See what happens with him over these next few weeks, but he looks like one of the best young corners in the league, and Carlton Davis, I think, can still play.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you have those two guys on the outside, man, it has a chance to be a pretty good defense, or certainly much better than they were last year.
It does. I mean, I'm intrigued by what you're going to get from Milton Williams. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does outside of that defensive line in Philadelphia where they had so much talent around him. He was great last year, but it's impossible not to recognize that, when Jalen Carter is on the defensive line next year, you're not going to get the sole attention. Jalen Carter is probably going to get the most extra recognition from that offensive line in terms of where we have to block first. Now all that's going to go to Milton Williams. He's the alpha there because of the money they paid him, because of the season he just had. Can he replicate the same kind of performance or even get close to it with less help around him?
And then, so just to touch on Vrabel for a minute here. His first year coaching with the Titans, 2018, they were 9-7 for 2 years, but in the 2019 was when they made that run to the AFC Championship, and then they went 11 games in 2020, 12 games in 2021. They're the number 1 seed in 2021. And it was right around that time where I was like, this guy's the next Mike Tomlin. He's never going to have a losing record. I don't care what you give him for a roster. This dude's just going to win. And then, they're under 500 the next couple of years. He gets run out of town. But the roster got absolutely depleted by that point. And I was so impressed with what Vrabel and the Titans did in 2020, in 21, to win 10-plus games. Remember, every single week we were like, who made the plays for the Titans? Oh, it's Danico Autry. It's Joe Schobert. He just got the most out of that roster.
Yeah.
And until he couldn't anymore, until it just got so wrecked. In particular, losing A.J. Brown coincided with
Something
losing.
He didn't want to do.
It coincided with losing A.J. Brown. So I'm interested in this reclamation project of Vrabel and his career because I think he looked like a difference-making coach until the roster just was so bad he couldn't do it. I do think he's worth the hype and we'll get this thing going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's fundamentally a very good coach. I think the problems in Tennessee were twofold. Number one, so he butted heads with other people. He might be a character, and this is a constant debate about is he part of Bill Belichick's coaching tree. I mean, this is a Belichickian type of trait, right? Is Belichick kind of a prickly asshole in a lot of ways at times, but you can overlook a lot of things when you win, right? People will go along with quite a lot of things if the outcome is winning the games at the end of it. And maybe when that stopped being the case for Bill Belichick, suddenly a lot of his shtick wore thin and people were no longer willing to put up with it, and that's, things start to unravel. Vrabel didn't seem to play well with some others in Tennessee, and ultimately that seems to have been the thing that cost him his job. However, he also seems to have been right in quite a lot of those conflicts, right? Vrabel did not want to get rid of A.J. Brown, and that, I think, was a mistake relative to what Tennessee could have done. Paid A.J. Brown, kept him in the building, kept an alpha, difference maker there. So I think that's a question. How does this work in New England? Is he able to have a more collaborative approach with people, or at least keep them on side rather than turn every disagreement into a major conflict that causes problems? Will his style rub people up the wrong way, or can he just get winning enough games that everyone stays on board anyway?
All right, man. Over under 7.5. Repeating, if they won 6 games or if they won 10 and snuck into the playoffs, I don't think I would be surprised.
Right.
Either way. Where are you going with the over under here?
Okay, based on the logic that anytime we have question marks at quarterback, you end up in this 5.5 to 7.5 range. This is the same win total as the Vikings. Now,
No, they're 8.5,
I
right?
thought they were 7.5.
I mean, it's not that far off, but they're
Right.
Yeah.
And okay, Minnesota has a tougher division, so that makes an impact, et cetera. But it feels like there are way more question marks on this team than there are for the Vikings. So just by that logic, I'm going under.
So
By the way, remember just a couple of teams we throw this in with. The strength of schedule thing. There's only really 6 teams that it makes any difference for whatsoever that are on the fringes in either direction. The Patriots have the second easiest strength of schedule in the NFL, according to sort of projected win totals as opposed to last season's win totals. So this is a good strength of schedule to boost that, which is probably a factor in that win total as well.
yeah, so that's why I'm going to go over the 7.5 because my logic's going to be I didn't trust Gerard Mayo as the head coach. That ended up after week 1 that proved true. I didn't trust the coaching staff that he put together. It didn't make a ton of sense to me. It just in the roster I thought was clearly one of the bottom 3 rosters in the NFL last year. I think all of that has been upgraded. You add in the schedule, I'll take the over on the 7.5 here for the Patriots. All right, wrapping up the AFC East, we got the New York Jets, 5-12. Last year, Aaron Rodgers out as quarterback. We have Aaron Glenn coming in. New regime all the way across the board with the Jets. Justin Fields takes over as starting quarterback, and they're over-under on the lowest end there with the worst teams in the league of 5.5.
Our workout buddy, Aaron Glenn.
Yeah, we were throwing some weights around with Aaron over at the scouting combine, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gave him a little head, and I was like,
At least in the gym at the same time.
congrats, coach.
Yeah.
Congrats.
You could probably lift more weight than Aaron Glenn, just size-wise.
You would think.
I mean, it depends on the exercise, but you're pulling weight capacity, I would imagine.
He was working hard. He was working
was.
hard during combine week. Thoughts on the Jets here? It's a transition year for the Jets. Joe Douglas out as GM, and whatever that happened last year, middle of last season. I don't know that he did an awful job. It's another one of those, right? You come back, you missed on the quarterback, and I think when you decide to go get Aaron Rodgers, the other moves that they made were also decent for their time, but it's like you go for it. Now all of a sudden you lose a lot of veterans, and you got to restock, and that's kind of where the Jets are right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting run because they've drafted some pretty good players. Now, again, they got a ton of credit institutionally for that sort of the season where they had 3 first-round draft picks, but they did, like all 3 of them seem to be pretty good players right now. You got Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson, who both just got given their big second contract based off how good they've been. Jermaine Johnson, I think, is a solid player. The next pick after that was Breece Hall, who is a talented running back. Like that's a pretty good draft haul from 4 picks in the top 35, 40 picks, whatever it was for Breece Hall. You had a lot of high draft picks, but they do seem to have hit on them, and that's not a given. It's been an inconsistent, but I think solid enough drafting history in the last few years for this team. But I think, honestly, this was just, Woody Johnson is your owner. This was like, you went in for this one thing, it didn't work, I'm going to fire everybody.
That's where we are.
Yeah.
Darren Muji comes in as GM, Aaron Glenn as head coach, and I think where you are from a roster perspective with the Jets, there are some of those nice young nucleus pieces that you mentioned. Throw in Quinnen Williams on the defensive line, and it's a transition year. I mean, they're paying Justin Fields $20 million a year, which is a transition bridge type of quarterback year. As I've said all offseason, though, the way Fields plays and the way he's played in his most recent 12 starts or so, 8-4 in his last 12 starts, right? Finished strong in Chicago in 2023. Early last year, remember the Steelers are 4-2 with Fields under center. He looked like he was reading out a little bit quicker. That's been the biggest issue for Fields is seeing the field, pulling the trigger when he needs to, just making good decisions with the football. But he would always balance that out with he could throw it pretty well, and his legs were unbelievable in Chicago mostly. So I've always seen him as a high. I see him now the way he's played the last 2 years as a high floor type of quarterback. So I think the Jets have a chance to be really competitive between Fields under center, the offensive line, the two bookend young tackles, Olu Fashanu, and then first rounder Amon Membu, a really good interior of the offensive line. So I like the line. Garrett Wilson on the outside. I certainly have questions about the rest of that receiving core, the playmakers generally. But I think from a run game, keep it close perspective, I think they have some ability. And then defensively, it's interesting the body types that they have at corner, the length that they have with Sauce Gardner, Azariah Thomas as a rookie. They've got some long corners where if they could play that press man
coverage,
right, that annoying style that the Lions played under Aaron Glenn.
Yeah.
There's some volatility to the defense where if it hits right, all of a sudden, this team's in a lot of close games.
That's a big thing, right? This defense has been built and designed now to play aggressive, physical press man coverage. That's what Aaron Glenn wants to run. That's what he was running a lot with Detroit last year. And I think the Jets corners are absolutely cut to make that type of deal. And this is going to, like, the people that are like, all Sauce does is hold every single play. Oh, you're going to love this season. This is what he's going to be asked to do every single play as well. So I'm fascinated to see if Sauce can have a kind of bounce back season. I think he was the best corner in the NFL for the first 2 years he was in it. And then last year had a relative down year. And now people are acting like the guy sucks. I want to see what kind of bounce back season he has within this defense. I think it's perfect for him and his skill set. I'm fascinated by Justin Fields still. I don't know if he's going to get much better, but he remains just a wild quarterback where that athleticism is freakish. Like those guys who can make something ridiculous happen, like one-on-one, when your left tackle blows a play, you make Myles Garrett look ridiculous and turn it into a positive play. There are not many quarterbacks in the NFL that can do that. So even if you're going to have a lot of bad plays in there as well, or you're going to leave a lot of meat on the bone because you're just not seeing it and trusting it and throwing. It's fun to watch those guys.
I think let's go back to like the process that the Jets had before they landed on Justin Fields. At the time, we said, hey, that's good process. When we say something's good process, it doesn't mean 12-win season incoming. This, it's absolutely going to work. What were the other options for the Jets at quarterback? New head coach, new general manager. Roger, you're overhauling everything about the building. Everything in the building is getting overhauled. Devontae Adams is out. Aaron Rodgers is out. So what were you going to do at quarterback? In a draft class where there were 2 first-round quarterbacks, you were picking at 7. The second first-rounder was Jackson Dart, who was a fringe first, goes late. So you had nobody to draft at 7. And so they bring in Justin Fields and on a buy low where, again, he's won some games recently. He has a great skill set. He looked unbelievably accurate at Ohio State. It's just a matter of, all right, can we get more consistent? Can we cut down on some of the turndowns, the misses that he's had in recent years? That's absolutely a great opportunity. Bring him in as an opportunity to see if we can get something out of him. If not, fine. We'll draft somebody next year. So I like the process of landing on Justin Fields. It might be a 6-win season, fine. But the idea of like seeing what you could have, because if you do get the best out of Justin Fields, all right, then maybe he is the guy to build around. We've seen enough of that in the NFL in recent years with Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, et cetera, et cetera. Why not see what you can get out of Fields here?
Yeah, and I think Fields is. I think there is a jump to be had in his game. I don't know if he'll ever achieve it or if he'll ever make that jump, but I do think it exists theoretically or potential-wise. His biggest problem, I don't think it's an inability to read a defense as much as trust his eyes, right? And I think those are two slightly different things. There are guys that can look at a defense and simply they don't understand what it is they're looking at, and they're never going to be able to make the correct decisions time to time to time. I think Fields' issue is more he's seeing it correctly. His eyes are going to the right place, and then he just doesn't trust it enough to put the ball in the air and actually pull the trigger. Where it's interesting is, so number one, like you said, in Ohio State, he has the accuracy. Like he's got the ability to put the ball where he wants it, when he sees it, when he trusts it, and puts the ball in the air. He's also more than got the arm to do it as well. So we've got NFL caliber athleticism, not just NFL caliber, elite caliber athleticism. NFL caliber arm, NFL caliber accuracy, and then the big thing is getting him to trust his eyes and put the ball in the air. Now, part of the changes this offseason is obviously shifting in coordinators, and out goes Nathaniel Hackett and everything that went with him and Aaron Rodgers, and in comes with Aaron Glenn connections to that Detroit Lions offense and Ben Johnson's offense. And in particular, the thing that characterizes that Ben Johnson offense is he's in that like paint by numbers, I'm going to give you the direction, I'm going to give you the game plan, I'm going to give you the plays, and you just have to execute. I'm going to give you the instruction manual, and all you got to do is follow it and put the thing together, right? And Goff is really good at that. Goff, I think, excels when he has a coach that's able to lead him to those things, whether it's Sean McVay, whether it's Ben Johnson. If the Jets are able to do that with Justin Fields, that feels like a way that might get him there, right? I'm going to give you the directions. All I need you to do is to verify what I've told you, give it the green light, and put the ball in the air. Again, I don't know if it'll happen. Maybe Fields is just tapped out at what he already is. But that, if I was trying to find that jump in his game, that's the type of offense I would want to put him in.
Our friends, you'll like this, as the analogy guy that you are. See Ball, Get Ball, the podcast by David Pollack and our friend Brent Rollins. Trent Dilfer was on there last night, and they were asking about Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. And his analogy was the butcher versus the surgeon. They're both using a knife, but the surgeon is precise. So it's Ben. So the analogy is Ben Johnson is the surgeon, whereas Caleb Williams stylistically is the butcher, right? And so you should listen to it as the analogy king. Trent Dilfer came up with a really good one, surgeon versus butcher, and how those two different styles will mesh.
Okay, sure. Don't love that one, but I remember
Trent said it better than me.
Remember when we talked about the difference between an algorithm and a heuristic?
Sure.
That's the Ben Johnson thing. Ben Johnson is an algorithmic scheme. Ben Johnson is going to give you the step A to B to C to D, and then you just execute, right? Some other offenses, I think, I think an algorithmic offense and head coach is a good thing for Jared Goff, and I think it's probably a good thing for Justin Fields. Previously, I think Justin Fields has been in more of a heuristic type of offense where it's like, just go up, right? Just go in that direction, figure out the pathway yourself, and I don't think that's been helpful for him because I think he paralyzes himself by indecision. I think he needs a head coach, or again, if you're going to get that jump of him, what I want him in is an offensive coach that's going to say, this is the step to get there. Go up, left, right, forward, hit A, right? That's what you want. So I think it remains a good metaphor for the type of offensive differences, and I think the Jets have the right guy for Fields.
Defensively, I mentioned the length that they have at corner. The Lions played as much man coverage as any team in the league last year. If that's the route that the Jets want to go, intrigued by that. And Brandon Stevens comes in from the Ravens. He was getting torched last year. They did bring him in for $12 million a year, but I would love to see if the rookie, young Azariah Thomas, can challenge for that starting spot opposite Sauce Gardner. And all of a sudden, you've got two really long corners who are difficult to get off the line of scrimmage and just throw off timing. And from a pass rush perspective, I think with Will McDonald coming off the edge, with Jermaine Johnson coming back, remember he was injured last year, missed a lot of time. Quinnen Williams on the interior, they have a chance to get after the quarterback. I got some questions about defensive tackle beyond Quinnen Williams. I loved Leonard Taylor III as an undrafted free agent last year. They don't have a lot of hold the point, nose tackle type body types there, so I think they've probably weak, I'd say, a defensive tackle despite having Quinnen Williams, but an intriguing group of at least pass rushers to complement the long corners that they have, and some pretty active linebackers with Quincy Williams and Jamie Sherwood. So I think the defense has a chance to be feisty, and if you pair that with an offense that has a QB run game and maybe shortens the game a little bit, I think that's why the Jets ultimately are going to be competitive and maybe a pain. As long as Aaron Glenn, this happened, unless he's just
terrible
over his head as a head coach, right? You never know when that's going to happen.
Right.
With any of it. You could say this for anyone. Assuming he's, a fine head coach, I think they're going to be just a tough out every single week.
And you've got some young guys on both sides of the ball that I think have the potential to either step in and be good right away, whether it's Mason Taylor, tight end, Membu, their first-round rookie this year, or guys that have been moving in the right direction but maybe didn't hit the ground running immediately and are still getting better. I mean, Will McDonald is becoming the kind of pass rusher that they hoped he might be when they drafted him. It didn't happen right away, but I think he is actually turning into that guy. It's training camp season. It's hype season. Fashanu apparently has looked fantastic so far in training camp. I loved him I think he had the best pass blocking chops of any tackle in that draft when he was drafted. Again, didn't quite look that way right away, but if he's able to, year 2, take a significant step, that could be a huge development for them as their left tackle. They've got some cool pieces.
I thought Fashanu, he reminded me of Laramie Tunsil, a guy that I thought had top 5 pass blocking potential. And when he finally settled in at left tackle down the stretch last year, I think we started to see that. So I'll call it a transition year for the Jets, who they're going to be, I think, difficult to play every week. And their over-under is 5.5. I'm going to go over this because of everything I've said about Fields and his ability to just, I think, bring some level of volatility or shorten the game just enough that the Jets have a chance to pull off a few extra wins than the 5.5. I think they're better than that, even though you lose so many flashy players like Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. And I know they also, by the way, they won 5 last year with Rodgers.
Right.
Playing a whole season. It wasn't like he got hurt. He played the whole season, and they still only won 5. But I think the reset in culture and youth and everything will work in their favor, and I'll go over the 5.5 here for the Jets.
Yeah, same. I think they'll be better than that.
All right, baby. Let's go NFC East. Starting with the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys were 7-10 last year after 17 straight 12-win seasons and no playoff wins. No. 7-10 last year. Dak got hurt, and always one of the most talked about teams in the NFL. Let's talk Dak's legacy.
Yeah, sure.
Just kidding. I'm kidding. I saw people joking about Dak's legacy coming up on like NBA podcasts and AFC West podcasts. Everybody's got to talk about Dak and his legacy. 7-10 season last year for the Dallas Cowboys. Coming into the season last year, our biggest question was like, how do you figure out how to win in the playoffs? This is Mike McCarthy's last season. Is this it? Well, Mike McCarthy's out. Brian Schottenheimer in as head coach. A lot of turnover here. Matt Eberflus in as defensive coordinator. So turnover at the top. From a coaching perspective, you have George Pickens coming in at receiver to complement CeeDee Lamb. You have guys like DeMarcus Lawrence out on the defensive side of the ball. What are you looking for with the Cowboys this year, man?
Yeah, I guess just how good can they be? For a couple of off seasons now, they've had underwhelming or disappointing off seasons that have generally been characterized by a total lack of activity in free agency and then a desperate attempt to fix a glaring weakness in the draft. And a couple of those players are hugely important heading into this season. You've got Tyler Guyton at left tackle. Looks like he avoided, what could have been a terrible injury for him. It was initially reported as catastrophic and subsequently downgraded to actually it's not that bad. So Tyler Guyton remains hugely important for them at left tackle. You've got this year's first-round rookie, Tyler Booker, drafted extremely high relative to expectations. He needs to come in and be pretty solid at right guard. How good can that offensive line be? The running back room, which is, Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Jaden Blue, the rookie, who's more of a pass game, scat back type of specialist. What can this group be relying on these players?
Man, there's so many fascinating storylines here. We mentioned on the training camp battle show, or at least I described it as the Cowboys building the running back room, kind of like how the average analytics-driven person might, where you just almost completely neglect it, take whatever's off the scrap heap and just move forward, and that's what you have. 2 straight years of letting Tony Pollard walk, now letting Rico Dowdle walk, and Rico did a pretty good job. But theoretically, you can kind of say that they worked it the right way by not investing heavily at the position. But there was also this point where it was like, man, is the run game good enough? The same thing we said about the Dolphins earlier. Is the run game good enough to win when you need to, late in the season, playoffs, or just when teams are taking away the pass? And now you're taking rejuvenation projects of Javonte Williams. Miles Sanders is just okay. So they've neglected the position again. Then you add in the Brian Schottenheimer factor. And remember, Schotty was not a coveted head coach.
No.
No one interviewed him except the Cowboys.
Right.
And then, of course, that becomes a punchline. And, why are you bringing in Brian Schottenheimer? And because of the Schottenheimer name, because Marty was all about Marty Ball, run the ball, stop the run, slow the game, do all that. I think there's, in Brian at points when he was play caller at various points was very run heavy. But the thing I remind people, he came in as the, quote, offensive coordinator for Mike McCarthy, even though he wasn't calling plays, which coincided with some of Dak Prescott's best play. And Schotty was there the last time Russell Wilson, though at the time when Russell Wilson had the most elite stretch of Russell Wilson's career in 2018 into 19, Brian Schottenheimer was there. So I'm fascinated by how this ends up looking here, because even though I think he's become like a punchline at times for, he runs the ball too much, didn't let Russ cook, he's been adjacent to some really good quarterback play, including with Dak.
Yeah, and it's not unclear that would be a bad approach for Dak Prescott either. I mean, he's had games and stretches where he's had to pass the ball a lot, and he's looked fantastic. I think he can be a very good quarterback in a pass-heavy offense as well, when the offensive line is good, when the receiving core is good. But it also might be true that the Russell Wilson type of approach of leaning on the run game and the offensive line is beneficial to Dak Prescott overall. Given how sort of sensitive he seems to be to changes in his environment, whether it's the offensive line, the receiving core, et cetera.
But Schotty was also, like, when Russ was the stretch where he was, quote, cooking, and they were letting him pass the ball a little bit more, Schotty was the guy calling plays. A little more screen game, a little bit more easy button for Russ, and not just run, play action. And it was a little bit... I think he did a good job dialing it up for Russ a few years back.
He doesn't help himself with the narrative of, the run heavy sort of old school coach when he talks, though. Have you seen some of the quotes that have come out of Dallas Cowboys camp?
What do you got?
This is from John Machota, who's just quoting him. Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer. The best thing you can do for any offensive line, any team offense, when you're playing elite defensive linemen is pound the frickin' football. Just frickin' try to shove it up their ass. And that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to be physical.
That's why he got the job. That's how the Cowboys operate.
Yeah.
So we're the Dallas Cowboys. We're just going to move the ball at will with the 3 first-round Tylers up front. It's going to be a fascinating dynamic, because all I'm saying is I think the quotes, because McCarthy would say that all the time, and then he would have the most pass-heavy game script. Like, he would kind of run the ball early and then just, go pass-heavy. So we'll see. And then
he is the point I'm making about all this is he does seem to be quite an old-school style of coach. The other thing he's had them doing is, like, there were some fights breaking out in Cowboys camp, so he just had them all running wind sprints. I mean, this is like straight out of the 1970s stuff that's happening in Dallas Cowboys camp.
I love it. I love the stories coming out of Dallas. Last year, CeeDee Lamb did not have a complement. Again, the way the Cowboys roster has evolved the last couple of years, I think every time Dak had a multitude of weapons, this offense did well. Dak did well. There was a point where CD was the number 2 to Amari Cooper, and they still had Michael Gallup, and CD was really the 3 when he first came in. He's a clear, legit wide receiver 1. They did not have a complementary piece last year. Now they have George Pickens. So whatever you want to say about George Pickens, as a high-end number 2 wide receiver, he could be outstanding. You keep his head on straight, all of a sudden defenses do actually have a couple of receivers to account for here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that combination of what can George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb be together with, some ancillary pieces that can make noise as well. Kevontae Turpin, that kind of dynamic gimmick speed receiver. Jalen Tolbert is not a bad player either. That could be a really good receiving core. Like, George Pickens, maybe the best contested catch receiver in the NFL. That itself is wildly noisy, and that's the problem. But when you're pairing that with CeeDee Lamb, I mean, that could be spectacular.
The other, again, thing that's changed in Dallas, they were ranked as a top 5 offensive line for 6, 7, 8 years, between having Hall of Famer Zach Martin, Hall of Famer Tyron Smith, They were loaded on the offensive line for forever, and now they've been chipped away at. Zach Martin retiring. He'll be replaced by first-rounder Tyler Booker. Tyron Smith got replaced last year by Tyler Guyton. Tyron Smith replaced by Tyler Guyton at left tackle. Guyton was one of the biggest projects coming out of the draft, had a 49 PFF grade as a rookie. So I would say this is...
And this injury is not helping his...
And now he's injured and
missing
better. Most, if not all, of camp here.
Right.
So Tyler Smith, love him at left guard. Cooper Beebe looked really good as a rookie center. I like both of those two spots. I think Terrence Steele is serviceable at right tackle. It's Guyton at left tackle, rookie Tyler Booker at right guard. They're the biggest question marks, whereas Dallas used to come into the season with 4 out of 5 spots solidified and maybe one question mark. I think everything's a tick below where it was, and I think that's going to be a problem in the run game and in pass pro and third and long.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this roster top to bottom, and it's like there's a lot of good players here and a lot of elite players here. I mean, CeeDee Lamb is one of the best receivers in the NFL. Micah Parsons in any given year could be Defensive Player of the Year. There's a lot of talent top to bottom, but there's also almost everywhere you look, there's a hole or there's a potential problem spot on both sides of the ball in almost every area. I mean, maybe receiving core, you'd say, I don't have a problem with that group. But, like, you could easily find a critical flaw in the offensive line. You could say the backfield might be nothing special. You can look in the defensive line and say there still might not be anybody that can stop the run up the middle. Like, where's every single level you're looking at it and saying, that's a red flag, that's a red flag, that's a red flag. So, it feels like a product of the last couple of off seasons where they were a very good team for 2-3 straight years, and then they just let that get chipped away at.
And then just going back to the running back room again, I think Javonte Williams, not the same player he was a couple years ago post-injury. Miles Sanders, I think he might get the award for the most Thomas Jones, 3.8 yards per carry, take what's there type of player. I don't have a ton of faith in the run game unless the offensive line, unless everybody in the O-line, comes good.
Yeah, or Javonte Williams somehow, multiple years removed from the injury, rediscovers his explosiveness, his burst, the thing that made him so dynamic coming out.
And I love the buy, just $3 million at Javonte Williams, who used to be an incredible tackle breaker. We're just 3-4 years removed from his best play. Defensively, not only did they miss Dak last year, they missed Micah Parsons. He missed a lot of time when he's out there, as you said. Outstanding. Interesting group of edge rushers here. Demarcus. My gosh, I'm like losing names here in my 40s. DeMarcus Lawrence, who's my favorite free agent pickup for the Seahawks.
Consequently, he must be one of the most critical offseason departures for the Dallas Cowboys.
Critical departure. But the group replacing him, second rounder, who we thought was a first rounder, Donovan Ezaraku.
I love that guy.
Yeah. Marshawn Leland is a second rounder. And then Sam Williams, who's getting a ton of hype in camp. I think the aggregate on the edge, including Dante Fowler, who's a nice 3/4 type of edge. I think they can really stitch it together opposite Micah Parsons there with some depth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think Ezaraku's might have as much juice as a pass rusher as anybody in this draft. And I would put him up there with guys like Abdul Carter in terms of the ways that he can beat and cause problems for an offensive line. You put him on a defensive line that already has Micah Parsons, and now you could potentially have some real juice.
I have the same concerns at defensive tackle that I had. I like Osa Odigizua, excellent pass rusher. Remember last year they were getting absolutely gashed in the run game. Historically bad in the run game the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season. It got better as the year went on, but Mozzie Smith still struggling up front to be what they wanted him to be as a former first-round pick. He had a 34 PFF grade last year that I think showed up on film. He was getting wrecked at the point of attack. They have no mass at defensive tackle. Again, it's just like the Chargers every year. I mean, I have massive concerns about that group up front.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a problem for years. Mozzie Smith was supposed to solve the problem and hasn't yet. I don't understand what they did with him to begin with once they drafted him, got him to lose a bunch of weight. Theoretically, the weight has been put back on now, but he hasn't made that impact. I don't know if they have a guy that can make that impact, but they still desperately need it.
So as I'm breaking this all down, it feels like the Cowboys of a couple of years ago, where I think the run game wasn't good enough, the run defense wasn't good enough, but they had some pass rushers. If they got a lead, they could lean on you with the pass rush and force a ton of turnovers. They remember how many turnovers they forced with Dan Quinn. Trevon Diggs, in the secondary, ball hawk. Deron Bland at corner, ball hawk. So it feels like the Cowboys of 2-3 years ago, that if they get a lead with the pass game, they can get after you and let things snowball when they beat. And that's why they beat up on bad teams, right? They get a lead, and then before you know it, pick six, and they're just leaning on you with the. But in the biggest games, when they're going up against the best teams, didn't have the line of scrimmage. They lost. They just pretty much lost at the line of scrimmage. So interesting setup here, I think, for Dallas once again. I think they're built the way they have been, and we'll see if Shoddy's old school approach actually can offset some of that. And maybe they're going to be more physical than I thought. Personnel wise, I think they're in a similar spot where they were a couple of years ago, though.
Yeah. They have a lot of question marks, and they need quite a few of them, I think, to break their way for them to be a good team. Even then, you've got guys coming back from injury who are question marks as well. I don't know. I don't love this team, but it is talented in some pretty critical key areas, which is important.
We haven't talked about Dak Prescott a ton. He's a good quarterback, right? When you're ranking quarterbacks, he's been in and around the top 8, for the last 4 or 5 years. And I think it's a weaker top 8 than it was 5-6 years ago when some of the elite quarterbacks were still there. But then 2 years ago.
Right. We're only a year removed from him having a strong MVP case.
But it was 90-plus PFF grade against bad teams,
sure,
and a 70-something grade against good teams, right? So the stats, I'm not saying they were hollow, but they were top-heavy against bad teams. So that was a fair question. But Dak's a good quarterback. You have a good quarterback, the 1-2 punch of CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. That's going to get you places. Micah Parsons in this pass rush, it's going to get you enough places to the point where I'm going to go over the 7.5 for the Cowboys. I just think ultimately they had a lot of the turnover that they've had on this roster, the inability to replenish it through the draft. They just they're stylistically a similar roster as a couple years ago, but not as strong. So I don't know that they're a 12-win team, but I think they're over 7.5.
I will go under. I don't love what this Cowboys team has put together.
Man, under 7.5? If Dak stays healthy, that's going to be tough to do. I think if Dak stays healthy.
If the Jets can
Unless Shoddy's a disaster. I'll say that now I have to say it about every first-year head coach. Maybe this first-year head coach just...
Maybe this guy's an idiot.
Just because it's like the Nathaniel Hackett clause.
Look,
you
anybody
have to say
could
that
be.
Because he might forget what you're supposed to do.
Whatever about Nathaniel Hackett, who I don't think was ever necessarily seen as the most coveted head coach in the world. But if Josh McDaniels can be the hottest coaching ticket out there and be probably the worst head coach in NFL history. Very minimum, I think Josh McDaniels is on the Mount Rushmore of worst head coaches in NFL history because he did it twice.
Right.
If he can do that, then it's possible for anybody who gets given the head coaching, it's possible for you to make that case that any of these guys is the next Josh McDaniels. Ben Johnson could be the next Josh McDaniels. Brian Schottenheimer could be the next. Any of these guys could be Josh McDaniels. And if they are, the team stinks.
What if Ben Johnson's just the worst people person and just a X's and O's nerd? That's all he can do. It's possible. Never know. All right, let's go. New York Giants, 3-14 last year, finished last in the NFC East, and FanDuel has their over-under at 5.5. We got Russell Wilson coming in as the starter, Jackson Dart as a first-rounder, Jameis Winston.
The most fun quarterback room in all of football.
In history. Jameis Winston giving the speeches. Got Malik Neighbors in year 2 here. What are you expecting from the Giants?
I don't know. I'm curious to see how this is going to go. The Giants are a pretty interesting team, top to bottom. They've got some very intriguing players. That draft class they had a year ago has the potential to be something pretty special. Malik Neighbors looks fantastic. Numbers would have been even more impressive if he hadn't missed a couple of games with that concussion. But all the way, top to bottom, that group, Theo Johnson looks like a very useful tight end. Tyrone Tracy was spectacular. He now gets to share a backfield with Scadaboo. Even on defense, you had Tyler Newbin. I think it's going to be a very, very good safety as well. Andrew Phillips was pretty spectacular in the slot. that every single pick they made last year might be a positive influence on this roster. I don't know what you're going to get with the quarterback play. I still have concerns about the offensive line. But the big question for me is, like, what is the plan at quarterback heading into the season? You know, what is the sort of long-term strategy with that trio? How do you want to play this, assuming that one guy is not going to play all 17 games, which I think is a fair assumption heading into the year? What is the plan? And then are they willing to stick to the plan when inevitably that gets challenged during the year?
And as we've discussed, usually you have this new quarterback with a new GM and a new head coach, and they're going to grow together. No, we've got year 4 of Joe Shane. We have year 4 of Brian Daboll. So where does that go? Do they have job security beyond this year?
Right.
What are the goals for the team? Like if you're the Maras, are you saying, look, this playoffs are bust, or you're out of here, show signs of life, don't win 3 games again, win 6, and then Jackson Dart's going to save us in 2026? It's a really difficult dynamic because I think the roster's moving in the right direction. As I've said many times before, when I'm interviewing for this job at the end of this year, for the Giants job, I'll feel pretty good about the nucleus that they've left, especially on the defensive line. I think they might have the best defensive line in the NFC East. That means better than the Eagles. That means better than the Cowboys. I think that's true. I think there's a good nucleus here. But I think with Russ at quarterback, you mentioned questions at offensive line, questions with playmakers beyond Malik Neighbors. I don't know how many wins you can actually expect. And then based off last year's winning percentage, if you want to use that, they have the toughest schedule in the NFL. I think the East is going to be really difficult and competitive. I don't know how many wins you can actually expect from the Giants.
Based off.
Even though I think everything is moving in the right direction. Under Joe Shane here, I think he's dipped and then he's coming out of it. I just don't know if it's going to be enough, to win games this year.
Yeah, based off the strength of schedule for forecasted wins, like projected wins for all these teams, they have the hardest schedule in the NFL, which feels wrong. The Giants, they weren't good a year ago. They're not expected to be particularly good this year.
Got a last place schedule.
Why do the Giants have the hardest schedule in football?
Part of it's you've got the Super Bowl champion Eagles. You got the
Commanders. The computer is breaking down here. This is a bad output.
They're playing the AFC West, right? Aren't they playing the West this year? All those teams are going to be tough.
Yeah. They've been hard done by here. The Giants should not have the hardest schedule in the NFL. That's a breakdown in the system.
So, yeah, that's the thing. It's going to be a challenging season for the Giants. I don't know. I mean, Russ was okay at points last year, but I think at this time of his career, I don't think he's carrying the team or anything, right? He got capped at some point, and that was with the Steelers last year. Can he just feed Malik Neighbors to the point where you're going to upset some teams? Because that could be a special connection. Russ can still throw it down the field, and Neighbors can win everywhere.
But the other thing is,
that's what you're banking on.
Stylistically, these quarterbacks are radically different. Like, you would imagine if the top 3 guys play this year, in Wilson, Jackson Dart, Jameis Winston, in whatever order, the offense will look different, very different for each of them, which is not, that's kind of weird dynamic as well. So you've got this Wilson starts, you've got whatever that offense is going to be with Russell Wilson at the helm, and then you've got, okay, if and when we have to make a change because Wilson is playing his way to the bench or we're just not winning as many games and we're under pressure, which guy do we pitch the ball to, and what does the offense look like with either one of those guys out there?
So, yeah, that's where I'm struggling. And the offensive line, it's been an issue for years. Andrew Thomas has settled in as a really good left tackle, but he's been banged up and even banged up here early in camp. John Michael Schmitz has struggled at center. He's heading into year 3. That's the time when you want to see signs of life from a center, from an offensive lineman. Evan Neal struggled mightily at right tackle.
Yeah.
They're going to try him at guard. I think there's parts of his game that do translate well to guard from a power perspective, so maybe there's something to salvage there. And
the entire interior might still be a big problem.
Yeah, so there's still question marks on the offensive line, another year running. And as I've said this before too, like if you were just ranking the quarterback room and what your expected output is this year, you're not going to put it in the top 20, I don't think. Is there a world where Russ plays top 12 to 15 ball? Absolutely. And I think that's the thing that maybe that's the biggest wild card here. Russ plays like a top 12 quarterback, possible, even though he's getting older. And the D-line is as good as advertised. That's where having Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence segment, let's talk about how good he is. Having Dexter Lawrence, though, and then the trio of pass rushers, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter coming in, they can get after the quarterback. And so those are the wild cards, I think. And some of the other additions on the defense for the Giants, those are the things that I think could make them really competitive, and maybe they, maybe they outperform the expectations.
Yeah, it's possible. The offense, I think, is the big question. I actually think the defense will be pretty good. That defensive line, as you said, could be incredibly good. The players in the back seven, though, I think are pretty solid as well. The Bobby Okereke at linebacker is a good player. Andrew Phillips, as we said, already showed a lot as a slot. As a rookie, Tyler Nubin, Javon Holland, that's a really nice safety duo as well. They bring in Paulson Adebo at corner. Deontay Banks, I think, is still salvageable in this scheme. So I think the defense could and should be pretty solid. I just worry that offensive line combined with what they're going to get at quarterback is enough that the offense will remain kind of bogged down. And also, as special as Malik Neighbors looks like he might be, this outside of him is still pretty. I mean, he's a one-man band really at wide receiver for them.
He is. I mean, they brought back Darius Slayton, it was a very weak free agent wide receiver group. We said, hey, Darius Slayton would be a nice deep threat type of number 3 for other teams. Is he going to settle in as the 2 again opposite Malik Neighbors? He is a good vertical threat. Wan'Dale Robinson's okay in the slot. They haven't really gotten what they were hoping from Jalen Hyatt on the outside. So yeah, how many games? Like, there was many games where I think they did a good job of feeding Malik Neighbors. We say this a lot. When you've got this great playmaker get the ball into his hands, they did that well last year. But he was banged up. He looked exhausted in multiple games because they kept feeding him. It's like, really? Again? And they everywhere. Screens, shallow crosses, intermediate routes, down the field. You can't keep throwing it to him nonstop. They need some other complementary pieces. I like what Theo Johnson was doing before he got hurt as a rookie tight end. So some wild cards here for the Giants. I definitely have the same concerns about the offensive line, especially if Andrew Thomas is hurt. And I just don't overall trust Russ at this point in his career. Defensive line-wise, though, I think they can be special. I think this is top 3 defensive line potential. The defensive tackles next to Dexter Lawrence, not great as far as track record goes. Roy Robertson Harris, he's been paid a bunch over the last couple of years. He's okay, but he's got some length. And Darius Alexander, early third rounder, like him a lot coming out of Toledo. So they're young. I think they're going to be it's going to be a good unit. I can't wait to see what they do with Abdul Carter because they have Burns and Thibodeau. On the edge, you can move Abdul Carter around, who did play linebacker at Penn State before converting last year. So I think that's the place where they can have some success and make things difficult on opponents.
Yeah. Abdul Carter could be amazing right out of the gate. I mean, he's getting rave reviews in camp. Remember, part of what made him such an exciting and enticing prospect is, as good as he was a year ago, that was basically his first year at that position. And the curve within the year was pretty impressive. So if that curve continues to go up as he transitions in the NFL, you could be talking about one of those special defensive player of the year caliber edge rushers.
And it's enough to impact. I mean, if he's that good with the other pieces that they have, I mean, that's a difference maker. Huge difference maker, like to the outcome of the season for the Giants.
Particularly if they're able to line him up a little bit more, alongside Dexter Lawrence. Like, it's tougher to do the combination of interior and edge rusher pressure because Lawrence is so nose tackle specific as opposed to just a 3-tech on the same side as an edge rusher. But imagine having to contend with, an Abdul Carter who is amazing and Dexter Lawrence on the same side of the line.
The other difference maker, Cam Scatterbo.
Yes.
Coming in to complement Tyrone Tracy at running back. Last thing on the Giants.
That's not really a joke, by the way.
Scatterbo is. I love him. I think he's fantastic. I think he's gonna have a very good NFL career, despite whatever his top end speed is.
Exactly. If Scatterbo came in and was immediately one of the 4 most productive running backs in football this year, it would not be the slightest bit surprising.
4? One of the 4 most productive?
Right.
Behind that line? Even Saquon couldn't do that with this offensive line.
If you finish the season and Scatterbo ranked 4th in rushing yardage this year, would it blow your mind?
I mean, I'm as big a Scatterbo fan as it gets. I think I'd be a little surprised.
I I could easily imagine, like, his style is so conducive to just being a very, very good NFL football player immediately. It wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, James Cook, Kyron Williams, DeAndre Swift in 2023. That was 2, 3, 4. Last year, it was Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, and then Jahmyr Gibbs. I could see him putting himself in that category.
I like it. You've been more aggressive than even me with Scadaboo. Let's
Have
wrap
you
it up.
learned nothing? It's all about aggressive take.
Let's wrap it up with Jackson Dart discussion. Expectations. Where do you think when and if does he play?
Yeah.
As I've said a few times, if they're 2-8, if they're 2-6, with Russ at quarterback, do you put Dart in there? Is that the save your job? Put him out there. Like what happens with this whole dynamic? Because I think it'd be great if they could sit him for a year, but we'll see.
I agree. If it was me, I would not want to play him year one. I think he would benefit from a year on the sideline, adjusting to the NFL, adjusting to the scheme that he's going to have to be running, or even just the style of scheme that he's going to have to be running. And next year is his year. Number one, I don't know if that's even their plan or if they're perfectly comfortable putting him out there halfway through the season. And number two, I don't know if even if that was their plan, would they stick to it if and when it's October and they've only won one game. So I think we see him. I would be surprised if we did not see Jackson Dart before November.
All right, man. Over-under is 5.5 here. Where are you going for the Giants?
Let's go over 5.5.
I think I'm going to say under just because of the schedule. As positive as I've been about the young nucleus and where they are, I still think there's enough holes. But if Russ is healthy and plays the whole season, it's going to be tough for him to go under. That's another difficult one. I'll say under, though. Somebody's got to go under.
Somebody's got to go.
Philadelphia Eagles, reigning Super Bowl champions, 14-3 last year, ran through the playoffs, had a really nice run there. Second Super Bowl for the Eagles in the last 7 years, but first one for Jalen Hurts under center at quarterback. We've got some turnover on the defensive line here.
Yep.
For the Eagles, question at right guard, but once again, coming into the season, Eagles look like one of the best rosters in the NFL.
Yeah, they do, if not the best. Like you said, the departures they had were kind of planned. You know, they had ready-made replacements to step in and pick up the slack and just take on bigger roles this year. So you've lost Milton Williams in the offseason, but Maro Ajomo is there. You've got Jalen Carter ascending into becoming potentially amazing. They bring in a guy like Ty Robinson. And then on the edge, you know, you lose players there as well, but you've got Jalix Hunt ready to step in. You've got Nolan Smith. You've got Josh Uche, who could be a sort of situational player for them and chew up some snaps. Like they've got the players, the contingency to deal with that. The rest of the roster is just in really good shape already.
What I was saying about the Dolphins a couple hours ago on this show and how do they get here? Go back and see how well they drafted. The Eagles had that stretch of multiple first-round picks and continuing to push those first-round picks into future years and flipping one of the firsts for A.J. Brown. The reason why they've been so good the last few years is because they laid this groundwork. And if you go through Howie Roseman and his tenure as general manager, particularly these last 7 or 8 years, I mean, the Eagles are one of the best at overall drafting, process drafting, and then manipulating, I don't want to say manipulating, but working contracts to the favor of the cap and bringing in free agents or bringing in, veterans, say, whether it's via trade with A.J. Brown or last year, the Zach Bond move at linebacker, unreal what they did with him. What they did with Javon Hargrave a couple years ago as he was in a completely different scheme in Pittsburgh, and then they unleashed him into their scheme. So I think just high level, talking about the Eagles, I think they attack every bit of roster building well, whether it's the draft, whether it's free agency, trades at the right time. Doesn't mean they're perfect. Like you say, Jahan Dotson trade was like, is that good?
That's the key.
But the last thing, but they're also taking undervalued players, Javon Hargrave, Zach Bond, players who may not have been incredibly productive at the NFL level, and then maximizing their ability. That's why they're such a powerhouse these last few years outside of one second-half collapse in 2023.
I think the key to their success is having the humility to recognize their mistakes quickly and fix them and move on from them. Because it's like you said, they're not perfect. And Howie has not been perfect. And he's made some bad decisions. And they've been some big bad decisions. But they fixed them. Like, they drafted Jalen Reagor one pick ahead of Justin Jefferson as their first-round wide receiver, as like a big impact splash play that's supposed to come in. Jalen Reagor has been a catastrophe in the NFL. He's been a disaster relative to every other wide receiver basically in that draft. But they quickly recognized that, fixed it. You bring in Devontae Smith, you bring in A.J. Brown, and now they've got two of the better wide receivers in the NFL.
That's why it's about stacking as good process-driven decisions.
Right. Jalen Hurts was drafted.
You're going to miss because the best are going to miss.
Jalen Hurts was drafted in the second round. People were big mad at that because you already had Carson Wentz. The Wentz thing happened. Hurts got that job. You hedged by getting an extra first-round pick in the following draft just in case Jalen Hurts didn't take a step forward and didn't become a good player. He did, and that let you spend those first-round picks and go nuts. Another one, like you drafted Andre Dillard in the first round. He was supposed to be the left tackle of the future. Didn't work out at all, and then you get a little bit lucky. You get Jordan Mailata, who's this seventh-round guy who'd never played football before, and suddenly he turns into an all-pro left tackle because you've got one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. So it's this combination of getting a little bit lucky in a few places, being very good overall, like their strike rate has been fantastic, and then having the humility to recognize and see your mistakes and fix them as quick as possible.
Since A.J. Brown has joined the Eagles, I've described their offense as being able to win in several different ways. Every time you're trying to say, how good is A.J. Brown, and you want to put him up against Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, the numbers are lacking because you just have this slower, more run-heavy offense. But, man, anytime it's an A.J. Brown game, you just see his ability to take over. So that's what I think makes the Eagles' offense so difficult to defend. Hurts is good. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, maybe the best 1-2 punch. They're right up there with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, whoever else you want to rank there. Dallas Goedert at tight ends. That trio is right up there among the best as well. And then the best offensive line. For the second straight year, question at right guard. All the other four spots, you've got the best bookends in Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson at tackle.
Yep.
Landon Dickerson's good at left guard. Cam Jurgens at center. He's solid. Question at right guard, it was Mekhi Becton who filled in last year, and they rejuvenated him for a season. A couple weeks ago, I said maybe it'd be Matt Pryor. It seems like Tyler Steen's going to be the guy that will get the first crack, and we'll see if they could bring him along. But not a lot of holes on this offense.
No, and even if right guard is bad for them this year, and that's the worst-case scenario, 4 out of 5 spots in the offensive line being good and the right guard being bad is still a pretty good spot to be in. That would still give the Eagles almost certainly a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. So like the worst case scenario for what is maybe their biggest weakness or red flag or hole on the depth chart is still the overall unit is fine, right? So that's the level of strength that the Eagles are working from, is that maybe their biggest weakness is still not a problem.
Yeah, and then the Saquon factor last year, what was it? 20% of the 50-plus yard runs in the NFL were Saquon Barkley. As great as he is at taking it to the house, that particular part of his game will be difficult to replicate. He still has these elements of, a lot of 1-yard runs and 2-yard runs that go nowhere. But behind this offensive line, once you give him a crease, plus you have the Jalen Hurts factor, he's a run threat. So that just opens up opportunities for Barkley to use his big play ability. That's why that run game was so spectacular last year, and he was such a huge part of comebacks against the Saints, against the Commanders, against the Rams. The number of times he just puts this, long touchdown on the board, what an advantage for the offense. It'll be difficult to replicate that, but you know that Barkley always has that ability.
He does. He has that ability, and the question is how close to that can he get? Because what was fascinating last year is that 3 different players tied for the most runs of 15 or more yards, right? So he's almost like the anti-Bijan Robinson, where he actually doesn't have more of those, like what is generally seen as explosive runs, than Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs with the other 2 guys. They all had 25 runs. of 15 or more yards. And the breakaway percentage was not, like night and day higher than anybody else either. So the sort of conventional ways of measuring breakaway runs, explosive ability, he's actually, he's good, but he's no more special than the other good players in the NFL. But then his ratio of taking those conventionally explosive plays and turning them into 80-yard touchdowns was insane, like off the charts nuts. So was that just a weird freak of 1 year where for some reason every time Saquon broke a big one, he broke it all the way? Or is he actually that much better than everybody else in the NFL at those particular runs?
Yeah, it's one of those. You asked me like if I'd be surprised if X happened. When it happened, I was not surprised that Saquon had those long runs. But to have that many of them this year, yeah, that's difficult to do again.
Right.
Even in a very good, favorable situation.
Because you would say guys like Jahmyr Gibbs are really good at that kind of thing as well. Like, is the gap between him and Gibbs that big when it comes to, if I get you 15 yards, can you take it 80? It seems no, but maybe it is.
He's got a really good
feel that's what I'm saying.
He's got a really good feel.
He
was never at the second level with the Giants, though.
Exactly.
I would love to take away the explosives, and I bet his yards per carry are the same as they were with the Giants, but he just had all these 60+ yarders.
That's the thing. It's like the kind of the data analyst in you would want to say that that's something that's not repeatable year to year. But actually, when you look at Saquon Barkley and watch him do his thing, it's like he might actually be, in this specific area, he might be that much better than the field.
Let's talk Jalen Hurts for a minute here, just because the media loves to discuss
the best quarterback in the NFL.
I think he's good. I think it's also fair to say that they've had the best roster the last few years. The very best roster on both sides of the ball the last few years. I think there's always been this part of Hurts' game where there's the it factor, winner, whatever you want to say. I think there's kernels of truth in that, and whether it's as a true freshman in Alabama, playing at Alabama, elevating Oklahoma for a minute, and then stepping in for Carson Wentz. And even though I don't think throw for throw he played better than Carson Wentz, like there was a little spark to the Eagles offense, and then it carried into 21, and then they're in the Super Bowl in 22. He plays 2 great Super Bowls in 22 and 24. He's got that run game element to him, both with the tush-push stuff, but just as a scrambler or on keepers. So there's a lot of winning football to Jalen Hurts' game.
Jalen Hurts has been constructed in a lab for Nick Wright to perfectly troll the world with, because he's the perfect combination of, he's got the it factor. There's the meme of him walking by the TV before the Super Bowl and everybody's picking the Chiefs, and he's like, all right, goes out there, he outplays Patrick Mahomes for the second time in a Super Bowl. And of course, they won the most. The Eagles are the most dominant team, ergo the quarterback of the most dominant team is the best quarterback in the NFL. Like, he has been specifically constructed to be the perfect take. Because I think if you were just watching football as an unbiased random fan from your couch, like over there, you would not put Jalen Hurts in the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't think that's an unreasonable or even particularly controversial take to suggest, but there's enough about his game that you could fairly easily construct an argument that he's as good as he is that guy. He's the next guy. He's the next Joe Montana who just gets it done when it matters the most. He's got the clutch gene. He's got the cool under pressure. And some of that's real. Like, I do genuinely think that Jalen Hurts does have a little bit about him where he does raise his game in those critical situations where he doesn't really feel that pressure, where he is going to play his best football. And he also is a perfect combination for this Eagles environment. The fact that they do have a great offensive line, the fact that he is durable and powerful, and you can use the tush push and get a first down every time we get to within 1 yard. Like, there's a bunch of ways where I think he is a little bit better than if you just pulled out his basic raw numbers, but it's not as much as like some people want to say.
Then I think what you have was Cam Newton calling him more of a passenger.
Dude, Cam Newton is on one recently.
So the only thing I would say, just to touch on Cam Newton really quickly, I would say most of his opinions I disagree with.
Sure.
Much like I said, I think Chase Daniel, like some other former quarterbacks, I usually just disagree with their assessment of the football game, which is fine. I don't think they're more credible than me just because they played NFL quarterback. But where the difference, like when people disagree with Cam, they're like, well, what were you? You only did this, or you didn't jump on a football. So then I empathize with Cam because I'm like, well, that's dumb to look at just his opinion is different from what his career was. Right? Because no one's like, well, you were a minor league pitcher. Like, sometimes they are, but like, you were a minor league pitcher. What's your opinion? So just because Cam didn't win a Super Bowl or didn't jump on a fumble or I think had one elite season, was good otherwise, but not great, I think how he played or Chase Daniel was a backup, I don't think any of that matters. Like, look at the content. I just disagree with the content and usually the way he conveys it.
Oh, but I think he's very quick to do that as well. I actually think that's one of my biggest issues with how he presents things is Cam Newton is very quick to be like, I'm coming from a standpoint of having been the face of a franchise and been elite. Shut up.
Yeah, I don't like that either.
I think I think that was his most recent attack against Ryan Clark. It was like, Ryan Clark, you were a low drafted guy. What's your opinion worth? I was, the number one overall pick. Ryan Clark, did he have a better career than Cam Newton? It's certainly debatable. I mean, maybe his peak wasn't as high, but like overall career, Ryan Clark, Cam Newton, it's not.
I don't think Tom Brady's opinion on football players necessarily matters either. I don't care who it is.
Even if you took that at face value, right? This is the thing, is that Cam Newton, leans on that as a crutch. And I think as a general concept, it's a bullshit crutch to use. Like, where was your standing in the game? That is the hierarchy of opinions we work with here, right? Because then you're like, well, whatever Tom Brady says, we go with.
Yeah.
If Tom doesn't have an opinion, then we move to the next guy down the list.
Peyton, you're up.
Right.
Go.
Peyton's opinion is what we're rocking. And then we just work our way down
until Chase Daniel and Dan Orlovsky are allowed to speak.
Right. Until finally, once 8,000 people have abdicated their responsibility on this opinion, we can finally listen to Dano on First Take, because that's where he ranks in this. Anyway,
Shouty shows are coming up soon, by the way.
Even if you gave... if you put stock in that as a general way of functioning when it comes to football, and clearly it's ridiculous, even if you gave that credence, I'm not sure he would rank ahead of Ryan Clark in the opinion hierarchy.
Anyway, we'll have a Shouty Shows offseason.
How did we get on to Cam Newton?
I apologize, because we're talking about Jalen Hurts, hot button issues. Shouty Shows are talking about it. They need some content, and figured we'd bring it in.
Oh.
Jalen Hurts, very good quarterback. I don't think he's in the top 4 or top 1. Carry on. I think this offense is elite once again. I will say I have a few more concerns about the defense. Josh Sweat out, Milton Williams out. You mentioned, hey, they have Moro Ajomo. Mm-hmm. They've got Jalix Hunt. Like, they have the players to replace them. I just think the depth has been chipped away at just a little bit on this defensive line relative to other years. Will they be bad? No. I just don't know if they're as dominant as they were. Certainly not in the Super Bowl, but overall, over these last couple of years, the Eagles have never had a bad defensive line.
Right.
10 years running. So they might be a little bit worse, but they might not be. Jalen Carter, ready to take another step forward. He could take over and dominate, so there's still plenty of pieces on that D-line.
I like their reclamation projects as well. Like, I like Josh Uche. I like Obo Okoronkwo coming in as well.
Yeah.
Like, they've signed some players that have in the past been very, very productive situational guys in particular.
And Bryce Huff is gone now, right? Bryce Huff's gone.
So.
He went back.
Yeah.
He went to San Francisco.
Right, to reunite with Robert Saleh. But I think that they could potentially get the best out of those reclamation guys as well, which would be huge.
Yeah. All I'm saying is it's like a little more question marky than it was in previous years, which could be completely offset by year 2 of Quinyon Mitchell, year 2 of Cooper DeJean in the secondary. If you guys have followed this show for the last 6, 7, 8 years, I think the one consistent part, and when people say, we're going to build like the Eagles, we're going to do what the Eagles do, we're going to build in the trenches, the Eagles live it, and they also execute that. They execute it by always having a top offensive line, always having a top defensive line. The difference maker has been in the secondary. When they actually hit in the secondary, they're a Super Bowl caliber team. And again, it looks like they hit on the youth movement of Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. There's going to be a question with Darius Slay out, Adoree Jackson, Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, whoever's going to win that cornerback 2 spot. So again, it's not as locked in as maybe it was heading into last year. But, man, if they're good in the secondary with the pass rush that they have, looks like another good defense once again.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best rosters in the NFL, top to bottom. I think they'll be one of the best teams in the NFC again. The only thing that can really derail them, I think, and this is true for a lot of teams, but is injuries. It's not so much any area that I think has problems. It's depth in a couple of areas I think is vulnerable to the injury. Like if A.J. Brown goes down, I think this is a very, very different football team.
All right, man. Over-under's 11.5 here for the Eagles.
Over.
I mean, this is the top one. This is tied with the Ravens, the Bills. I'll go over again. I think I've gone over on all those teams. The reasons they go under, usually something injury-related that is tough to foresee. That's why it's not 13. But I like this team. Once again, I think they'll win a lot of games. Take the over.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's wrap it up. NFC East. It's the Washington Commanders, the biggest surprise team of last year. They go from picking number 2 overall. They select Jaden Daniels, losing the NFC Championship to the Eagles, 12-5 last year. Some big offseason moves, trading for Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil. So a receiver in Deebo, starting left tackle in Laramie Tunsil. And FanDuel has the over-under at 9.5 for the Commanders. I think they're one of the trickier teams to peg. I will explain in a second, but what are your initial thoughts on the Commanders?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they scream regression this season, except Jaden Daniels might be special enough to offset all of that.
Yeah.
Right? That's where they feel a little bit like the New York Giants from a few years ago, except instead of Daniel Jones at quarterback, they have Jaden Daniels. And that could completely change what that means.
The Giants were absolutely, it's actually a really good comparison. They were massive regression candidates after they're making the playoffs in 2022. We're like, this is a rebuilding team that just overachieved in year one. You could make the same argument.
I mean,
for the
Washington
Commanders.
won one more game than the Giants that year. The Giants went and beat Minnesota, upset them, and that got everybody all excited. If they'd won one more game, they would have been where Washington was.
It's a really good comparison. First-year head coach, they surprise, they make the playoff run. The difference is, yes, Jaden Daniels versus Daniel Jones, but then also bringing in Deebo, bringing in Tunsil. I think they upgraded the roster from where it was last year as well.
Well, the Giants they lost the run of themselves coming off the back of that, and they used that to kind of keep their players. Washington lost the run of themselves. Not a lot, but the excitement that Washington generated off the back of that run was used to then bring in players. So that's where they're like Houston from a year ago. Like Houston surprised everybody. They overachieved. It's like, oh, look, we got our special quarterback. We aren't just good now. We can win a Super Bowl this year. And they went out and acquired players, and they got aggressive. So it's sort of Washington now are almost like a hybrid of the Giants from a couple of years ago and Houston from a couple of years ago.
The Texans are definitely the more exact proxy, though, just because it was picked number 2 overall, hit on the quarterback, C.J. Stroud in Houston, Jaden in Washington, and then the aggressive
in that area
on-paper moves that look great.
But I think in that area it is. But I don't think Houston were necessarily a prime regression candidate last year. I think things needed to spiral out of control for that to happen. Whereas the Giants. So that's why I think it's like a melding of those two things. They've treated it like Houston did, but I think they fundamentally are more like the Giants in terms of it's built on shakier ground that is potentially ripe for regressing.
So Jaden Daniels looked special last year. The other part that could regress is the fourth downs, like how efficient they were on fourth downs, but also just how aggressive Dan Quinn was on fourth down. I think they won multiple games specifically, just like Raheem Morris in Atlanta, specifically because of how aggressive Dan Quinn was on third down and then how efficient they were. And then you go, okay, how do you do that? Well, when you have the skill set of Jaden Daniels, and I think if you're trying to think positively here about Washington, the way they played down the stretch, I think they started to put a little bit more on Jaden Daniels' plate. They started to tap into his running ability more and more. I described him last year as, I think, the best scrambling quarterback in the NFL. I think it's Lamar's always in his own world. Like, if he wants to scramble well, he can.
Right.
But I think the guys who execute scrambling on a pass play the best are Jaden Daniels and Josh Allen. I think they're the two best at that particular skill. Lamar Jackson's the best overall running quarterback. But they started to lean Washington on Jaden Daniels' running ability in the design run game, QB sweeps and whatever else, in crunch time, on fourth down. That's still there.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't mean you're going to be 80% on fourth down or whatever they were at points last year. but you still have that really difficult to defend skill set of Jaden Daniels.
Those, the fourth down models, and this gets tricky because the smaller you slice these sample sizes, the noisier the data is. But those kind of fourth down models of, what the analytics says, they need to factor in who the quarterback is for that to be meaningful, because the league-wide fourth down data does not apply the same way to Josh Allen, to Lamar Jackson, to Jalen Hurts, and to Jaden Daniels as well as it does to some of these other guys.
Well, the right models do, but you might want to. The tweak would be like, hey, we're going to give it to Allen. Allen's keeping it, or Jaden's keeping it. Now run that.
Well, it's just that, those guys, what I'm saying is that those guys, so normally if you had a team that was hyper aggressive in fourth downs throughout a season and maybe unusually good at converting them, you'd be like, well, there's another regression thing for next year. That's definitely going back to the mean. But when your quarterback is one of those guys, it might not, because you are dealing with the most, or as good a scrambler as any quarterback in the NFL. You are dealing with as dynamic a rushing threat, period, and a guy that changes the math up front. So, that is an area where I think Washington could continue to be excellent and steal win percentage points relative to other teams.
If you were looking at the Commanders roster last year, and this showed up in a lot of games that they lost, I think they struggled up front, stopping the run in some big games. They struggled from an offensive line perspective. Like, you would look at both trenches, and it showed up in the NFC Championship game against the Eagles. Both trenches, they were okay at best, probably on the weaker side. But again, if Jaden is that special, that does balance things out a little bit. He handles pressure well. He scrambles well. He's going to run when nobody's open. He had guys to throw to. Terry McLaurin was fantastic. But I think the line looks better with Tunsil locking it down at left tackle. That was a big question last year. Sam Cosmi at right guard. We just had Brandon Thorne talking him up as one of the better guards in the league. Tyler Biotish, I think, is very dependable center. So I think the line's better. Then the Debo factor as well.
Josh Connerly coming in.
Josh Connerly could be
take a job.
Him and Andrew Wiley maybe battling it out at tackle. We'll see if Connerly can take over. McLaurin looks special. Hopefully he gets paid at some point. I think he deserves it at this point. I think if he was, he's been QB proof through the years. Now has his best quarterback in Jaden Daniels, and his downfield ability is special. Debo was not healthy or the same player last year. But if he just turns back the clock 1 or 2 years, even if he is what he was last year, he's still a good player.
Yeah.
But if he turns back the clock a couple of years ago where he's this move him around type of weapon, good receiver, but really great offensive weapon, man, this offense could be special.
Not just a good player, but even if he's what he was last year and only the slot receiver version of what he was last year, like even if they say you're not going to do any of the backfield stuff, you're not going to play running back, you're just going to be a wide receiver, like he's still an upgrade for them. So Debo Samuel, to me, it's a good move, and it's all upside. Even if he's just the lowest version of what he could possibly bring to the table, it's an upgrade of what they had, and you have all that extra room of, well, what if he goes back to being, the Debo Samuel that was such a dynamic playmaker in San Francisco?
Run game-wise, Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson, I think they're fine. There was a lot of talk about bringing in more dynamic running backs. Still think Chris Rodriguez, man.
Ja'Cory
Crosby-Merritt. You got him. So yeah, I think the run game will be fine again because what Daniels brings to the table as the QB run threat. I think the Commanders going forward can probably afford to neglect the running back position a little bit. But when and if they do get, whether it's Crosby-Merritt or a Saquon type, it's like, man, okay, I get it. They could create some serious explosives with the run game.
But that's how I would approach it. You talked about Dallas sort of doing things the way the analytics would say, just in terms of not investing in the running back position. Like Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt is the type of running back that I would want adding to that type of backfield every year. Like, take a guy in the mid to low rounds who actually a lot of people think has, he could be RB1 in any given backfield. I don't think anybody was saying that about Jaden Blue before the draft. Like, he was a running back of a type, dynamic pass catching type of option, but nobody was like, this guy's going to be RB1 in your backfield sooner rather than later. Crosby-Merritt could be that guy for Washington. Like, if he ended up being the alpha back in that backfield in week 11, again, it wouldn't blow my mind.
Defensively, again, so the place where I would sour on Washington is just the personnel on defense. I know Dan Quinn's been a fantastic defensive coach. I thought they got after the quarterback pretty well as far as sacks go, but I don't think they were terribly disruptive last year. On paper, it's not a good defensive front. Deron Payne at defensive tackle, they paid Javon Kinlaw this offseason. I think Kinlaw can get after the QB, still struggles in the run game. Jazon Newton, Johnny, as a rookie, kind of had his ups and downs, but each of those guys, Payne's played better football in his career. I think Newton still has a lot of potential. I think Kinlaw is at least on the upswing as a dependable defensive lineman. So I think it's possible there. I love the way they deployed Frankie Louvu last year. He's an edge linebacker hybrid. They blitzed him a ton. He's a very effective pass rusher. Honestly, might be their best pass rusher off the edge right now. Dante Fowler's out. He had a bunch of sacks last year. Dorrance Armstrong, Dietrich Wise coming off the edge with Cleveland Farrell. I do wonder if this is a team that's in the Za'Darius Smith, Jadeveon Clowney, sort of edge
They just
market.
signed Von Miller. He's ready.
Oh, that's right. They had Vaughn, too. I wonder if they're also in the market for someone else.
Their big thing is, though, that they so much of what they need to be good is guys taking a step. Either, somebody like Johnny Newton taking a big step forward year two, or Deron Payne going back to the player that he used to be. I mean, he's not been the same guy. Is it since he got paid, or was it even before that? But Deron Payne needs to be an impact player for this defense.
The other big question for me, remember how aggressive Adam Peters has been as GM. Trades for Marshawn Lattimore in the middle of the season last year. Lattimore did not look great down the stretch. We know what happens with corners. Sometimes they lose a step, and that's it. It's over. But that hit pretty quickly for Lattimore, battling injuries last year. If he's good, that changes a ton. They draft Trey Amos in the second round. I like him as a rookie. Mike Sanders did a fantastic job as a rookie playing on the outside as a guy that looks like wasn't expected to play on the outside, but he has a chance to move back to his more natural nickel spot. He's that, go hard, hustle dude that everybody wants on their defense, especially playing in the slot. So I think that trio of corners could be really good. Jonathan Jones as an insurance policy on the outside as well. I think so much is on Lattimore, though, to go back to where he was a couple years ago.
Yeah, it could be. It's also an area like that. The secondary generally is where you're concerned the most for this defense, maybe this team. If Lattimore is just kind of done at this point, then you're relying on Sandersill going back outside, probably Trey Amos, a rookie, to come in and play well right away.
I think they'd go Jonathan Jones and Trey Amos outside.
Maybe. And then you have a pair of safeties that are not necessarily dominant either. So that secondary could be a huge weakness.
All right, man. So for Washington, I guess my overarching breakdown here is if you're going man for man on their roster, I think they're 15th or so, 20th maybe. But I think the quarterback is a force multiplier. I think the head coach, I think Dan Quinn deserves a ton of credit. I think he was a good head coach with the Falcons, and then he was an excellent defensive coordinator with the Cowboys. He evolved as a defensive coordinator, and I think showing that helps me believe the guy's going to continue to grow as a head coach too. So I think you've got force multipliers at QB, at head coach, and then you have an elite receiver, an elite left tackle, a wild card in Deebo Samuel. I believe the Commanders, if you were just ranking them top to bottom, the roster is not there yet, but that's like 5 pieces that for a team that just went to the NFC Championship last year, they could make that run again because those 5 pieces are so strong.
And you've got Cliff Kingsbury at coordinator stayed there.
Another one.
Kingsbury, yeah. I think, deserves a ton of credit for how he rebuilt his offense, how he created the whole environment there for Jaden Daniels to be really good off the back of his head coaching stint, which didn't end well, obviously, in Arizona. Keeping Kingsbury around, I think, has been huge for them as well. So, yeah, look, I'm very interested by this team because I think overall they're a lot weaker than certainly their playoff run would indicate. Even with the additions, and I like them generally, Laramie Tunsil, Deebo Samuel, like those types of veteran moves, I think are smart. It could still easily be primed for a second-year letdown or regression, a bit like Houston from last year. But Jaden Daniels might be the guy that says none of that matters.
All right, make a pick, man. Over under 9.5 here for Washington.
It's so obvious that I want to go under and say they win like 9 games, but. No, I'll go over 10.
Okay. Let me preface this by saying I believe Jaden Daniels is a future MVP candidate. I've talked up the force multipliers that Jaden Daniels, Dan Quinn, Terry McLaurin, Laramie Tunsil can be for this team. But I do have the sour taste of being so high on the Texans last year. And the fact that I think there was some overachieving with Washington last year that will be tough to replicate. And I think it's a tough NFC. So I'll say under. Because you have to pick one. You have to pick over or under.
You do.
So I'll take under. Even though, again, I wouldn't be surprised if Daniels continues to take a step forward and they look like one of the best teams in the NFL.
It also, as much as I think it was an overachievement last year, it was only by one game, Like if they had lost in the divisional round to Detroit, that would have been about their right level.
Yeah, they were probably a toss-up against the Bucs.
Yeah.
Right? Given where they were. They beat the Bucs. I thought the Commanders played great. They got some turnovers. The Lions didn't play their best game. Yeah.
The Lions, I think, were a better football team who did not play better on the day.
That would have been the exact proxy for the Texans if they just lost in the divisional round to a clearly better team.
Yeah.
But instead they pulled the upset and then lost to a clearly better team pretty handily in the NFC Championship.
I'm not saying they didn't deserve to win that game. They did their part. They played spectacular. It's just the Lions did not play their usual level of football in that game, and they consequently what I believe is the worst team overall was better on the day.
All right, man. We're halfway through all of our previews right now. We've got the North and the East out of the way. We got the South coming on Monday, and then the West a week from today, live here from Check the Mic, potentially Jeff Ruby's studio.
Will we have all of our studio teething trouble worked out by the end of the preview series? That's the question.
By next Thursday, hopefully we'll have the FanDuel
dim lights
dimmed a little bit more, audio synced up properly. We're getting there.
Yeah, audio synced up, being able to broadcast in the correct quality without it banjacks and everything else.
We did
a lot to work on.
We did react to some Shouty Show stuff today. We'll have I think we're still going to have a formal Shouty Show reaction at some point.
I don't know if we're doing a show anymore.
Not a full show, but we'll have a. Were we that mean to Cam Newton?
No, no more than he deserved.
Wow. Can't wait till he probably will react to that if it gets to him, huh?
Maybe. Look, this is where we're going to rely on your size,
We're more of an 80s tag team. Could you get some Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty?
Are there many big man? Who are the big man, little man tag teams? Because that's kind of what we're dealing with here.
If we were in 1990, where my 8-year-old brain still is, Power and Glory.
Who was that?
Hercules and Paul Roma. So I would be the Hercules in that mix there.
Right. Or your Animal, Road Warrior Animal.
Animal and Hawk?
Yeah.
They're both huge.
No, Hawk's pretty small.
What do you mean?
Hawk was dramatically smaller. He was the high-flying part of that combination, and Animal was the power.
They were both power. Hawk may have been taller than him.
Yeah, but he was thinner, much thinner.
Nah, I don't think by much.
No, much thinner.
Peace.
Stop it.
LOD.
Anyway, point being, with you, Cam Newton, and me, I'm very much the small person in that trio.
You are the smallest person in that trio, for sure.
Yeah.
Appreciate everybody bearing with us when there are some issues, being with us this entire time. Appreciate the new subscribers. If you're not subscribed, be sure to do it. Hit the subscribe button, do the thumbs up, do all the things on the way out. We've got a little bit of travel coming up in the next couple weeks too. We're going to try to hit a couple camps. Oh, I got it. If you're listening, there was a Bears fan. There was a Bears fan a couple years ago or a year ago that said, "Hey, if you come out to Bears camp, come by the restaurant, the bar, whatever, come and eat." I'm looking for a free meal here.
You are soliciting for a free food.
I cannot find the email where somebody said, "Hey, if you come out, I need to know where to visit." So I think we're trying to get to Bills Bears joint practice in a couple weeks here. So if you're the person that emailed me about, "Hey, come visit so and so restaurant in Chicago, in Lake Forest," let me know.
Steve wants his free meal.
No, I want to hang out and interact with the fans who have food.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, specifically the ones that have food.
I'm hungry. Just let us know if you were the one that emailed us. I can't find it.
We have, obviously, and now that we've been anti-Shouty Show, we have our anti-Shouty Show T-shirts as well, which you can find.
Links in the description.
Yeah, links in the description.
Go check it out.
No Shouty Shows.
All right, man. That it for today?
Yeah, sure.
All right, beautiful. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again Monday morning on Check the Mic.